Well, sentencing proceedings in the Sandile Mantswe murder case are expected to commence in the High Court in Johannesburg today. A 23-year-old man who allegedly shot and killed a 21-year-old female student will appear at the Durban Magistrates Court soon. The protest action in the south of Johannesburg has been suspended. Citizens are demanding that the Gauteng Human Settlements Department deliver on the 48,000 housing stands it promised to communities following last year's violent protests. Meanwhile, police are monitoring the situation on Jakes Gerwel Drive near Mitchell's Plain in Cape Town.
So it was the first time that we were not really as good as we can be, so we needed luck, and that's what we had. But I think over the whole Champions League campaign so far, it's absolutely deserved.
Later in sport, Liverpool coach Jurgen Klopp thanks Lady Luck after his team see past Roma in the UEFA Champions League semi-finals in a record-equaling tie.
Very good morning to you and welcome to Newsroom. I'm Shante Yankees. Thank you very much for joining us this Thursday morning. Coming up this hour, we will continue to give you updates on the protest action that has been taking place in the south of Johannesburg, as well as the talks. Griselda Lewis is standing by for that. Bernard Kirtley is also standing by this morning with all your sporting highlights. Very good morning to you, Valen. Sporting-wise, what can we look forward to?
A very good morning to you, Shante. Well, we've finally got the UEFA Champions League final lineup. Real Madrid are up against Liverpool, but what an action-packed semi-final second leg between Liverpool and AS Roma that we saw last night. Good morning to you. I look forward to bringing you your sports bulletin at 1:45 every hour here on Newsroom. First up, though, in this hour, your top stories with Shante.
At the top of the hour, protest action across Johannesburg has been suspended. This follows a service delivery protest yesterday in various parts of the city, including Eldorado Park, Freedom Park, Lenasia, Diepkloof, Dobsonville and Meadowlands yesterday. Well, protesters are demanding that the Human Settlements Department deliver on the 48,000 housing stands that it promised communities following last year's violent protests. A Gauteng Human Settlement MEC Uhuru Moela has called for calm and community leaders to work with government to resolve their issues. Johannesburg Metro Police says the situation is calm this morning. Well, the situation on Jakes Gerwel Drive at Mitchell's Plain in Cape Town is calm at the moment. Despite this, police continue to monitor the area following recent service delivery protests. Well, one person died and 2 others were injured during violent protests in the area. Yesterday, the situation was described as tense and volatile. 30 people have so far been arrested for public violence. Well, Jakes Gerwel Drive between the R300 and Highlands Drive was closed to traffic overnight but has now been reopened. Well, sentencing proceedings in the Sandile Mantswe murder case are expected to commence in the High Court in Johannesburg today. Yesterday, he was found guilty of murdering his then 22-year-old girlfriend, Karabo Mokoena. Mangoba Mkunu reports.
A year and 2 days since Mokwena's brutal killing, her boyfriend Sandile Mantswe seemingly unremorseful.
I didn't kill her. Yeah, didn't kill her, man.
Hi guys, my name is Karabo Mokoena.
Mokwena's charred remains were found in a veld in Lyndhurst a day after she went missing. Mantswe denied killing her, claiming she committed suicide. But the court believes his version is far from the truth.
Did not have a tendency to commit suicide, did not attempt it, did not commit it, and that the accused killed her.
The court also found Mantswe guilty of abusing his girlfriend and believes he dumped her body to conceal her death.
Of the body of the deceased by burning it beyond recognition. The accused had, in all likelihood, already killed her in his apartment if one looks at the photos and how he carted her body in a dustbin from her apartment to his vehicle. There is no doubt that his intention was to cover up the fact that she was dead and the cause of her death.
Old wounds were reopened for the Mokoena family.
I think Sandile is sick. for me, I think he needs a lot of counseling. He needs to be helped, and maybe reality has not come to the fact that he has done something wrong. But wait until he wears that yellow overall that is written prison. That's when he'll realize that he has done something wrong.
Manqaba Mchunu, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Meanwhile, a 23-year-old man who allegedly shot and killed a 21-year-old female student will appear in the Durban Magistrates Court soon. The suspect was arrested after he allegedly killed a young female known to him at the Lonsdale student residence in Durban's Point area. Well, the victim was a first-year quantity surveying student at the Mangosuthu University of Technology. In a statement, the university said that the former student was signed into the residence by another registered student. The suspect was found at the scene with an unlicensed firearm and ammunition. He is facing murder charges and possession of an unlicensed firearm and ammunition. The motive for the shooting is still unknown at this stage. Well, unions representing striking bus drivers are set to meet with employer associations in Johannesburg again today in the hope of ending the nationwide strike, now in its third week. The parties are 0.5 percentage point apart in negotiations on a pay increase for the drivers. Other areas of disagreement are dual driver payment, night shift hours and insourcing. Talks are planned for 10 a.m. this morning. Currently, workers are demanding 9.5% for the first year and 8.5% for the second year. Employers are, however, wanting to pay from the 1st of May a 9% increase and are offering 8% for the second year. A memorial service for television personality Akumzi Jezile will be held at the Rhema Bible Church in Randburg in Johannesburg this afternoon at 2 p.m. 29-year-old Jezile was traveling to the Eastern Cape for a family ceremony last weekend when he was involved in a fatal crash on the N6 between Komani, formerly known as Queenstown, and Jamestown in the Eastern Cape. Well, 2 other artists were among the 5 victims who died in the crash. The funeral service will also be held at the Rhema Bible Church starting at 9 a.m. on Sunday, and he will be laid to rest at the West Park Cemetery in Johannesburg. Well, former Northern Cape ANC chairperson John Block and businessman Christo Schultz will today appeal their conviction in the Supreme Court of Appeal in Bloemfontein. Well, the duo were only granted leave to appeal their fraud and money laundering conviction and not their sentence.
Block and Schultz were sentenced to 15 years behind bars. Both men were found guilty of receiving kickbacks in a multi-million rand property deal with the Trifecta Group owned by Schultz. Their hearing for leave to appeal has been set down for 2 days.
We don't think there's any court that will come to a different conclusion. But this is an opportunity for us to convince another court that the accused persons were correctly found guilty, and then the sentence that was imposed on both of them is an appropriate sentence.
Block and Schultz were sentenced in December 2016. They are both out on bail of 150,000 rand. Block faces other criminal matters related to the Intaga water purification plant procured for the Solplaki municipality and the Provincial Health Department. The Intaga matter will be back in the Kimberley High Court in August. Nobelungu Nowapane, SABC News, Kimberley.
Judgment has been reserved by the Supreme Court of Appeal in Bloemfontein regarding the President's powers to reshuffle cabinet. Jacob Zuma is challenging the ruling by the High Court in Pretoria to disclose reasons for the March 2017 cabinet reshuffle. Apumalele Mdalane reports.
The DA challenged former President Jacob Zuma's decision to effect cabinet changes. The party argued that Zuma had acted irrationally when he fired Pravin Gordhan and Cebisi Jonas. The High Court ordered Zuma to divulge records for his decision, but the president disagrees, arguing the High Court judgment should be overturned and that the DA's application violated the doctrine of separation of powers.
Cabinet reshuffle is an entirely different executive function. There is no record of anything. There's no duty to consult with anybody about it. It's a political decision, it's a polycentric decision made by the president himself and cannot in itself implicate the production of a record.
The DA argues the president has no unfettered powers and that his decisions are subject to the constitutional scrutiny.
The only way to properly test public power under review is to provide the record. That's what the Constitutional Court said last week. That is binding on this court, but in any event it endorses all of the things this court has said for the last 5 years.
Some analysts contend that political decisions are bound by the Constitution.
It is often the president who can appoint and actually dismiss members of parliament, but at the end of the day, he himself have also been appointed by his own political party, so he needs to take them into confidence when he takes such major decisions.
Judgment has been reserved. Apumelele Mdlalane, SABC News, Bloemfontein.
COPE leader Mosela Kotla has warned the ANC-led government and fellow South Africans to be extra careful when debating the issue of expropriation of land without compensation. He says if it's not done in accordance with the Constitution, it will take the country back to war. Ntantla Kalane reports.
Musiwa Lekota, COPE's leader, clarified comments he made at the land debate over the weekend. At the event, he stated that the narrative told that land was stolen is flawed and still remains firm on his position that there is no need to review Section 25 of the Constitution to allow for the expropriation of land without compensation, as he believes those who own the land must be compensated.
With every human being, black and white, that they will try and go and do that, can only take our country back to war.
Lekota also stole the show during the debate. He says the governing party is not the same anymore.
We stood out to say we would not associate ourselves with the violations of the Constitution.
Meanwhile, a committee of parliament investigating whether sections of the Constitution must be amended has called on written public submissions around the issue. Ntantla Khatlane, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Well, Social Development Minister Susan Shabangu has assured parliamentarians that their court application to suspend the social grants tender will not affect payments. The department and SASSA have approached the Constitutional Court to suspend the tender application pending the correction of certain technical matters.
Sub-beneficiaries should not be worried about their payments. It will be paid on time at regular pay points. So says the new Social Development Minister, Susan Shabangu. Similarly, those who draw money from commercial banks or retail stores can still receive their money there.
There is a suspension we've lodged with the court. There's nothing we are doing which is illegal. We suspended the tender of the 2.5 million people's payment. We did that because there were challenges. When we identify challenges, we cannot just watch them and fold our arms, because that was going to make us to be in court forever.
Shabangu says the department continues to comply with the Concord ruling on social grants payments. The Cash Pay Master Services contract is expected to end in September, but the company's subsidiary is under the spotlight.
Green Road, because it's the one which dispenses, deals with the money, they started charging 10 rand. So you will hear, even the beneficiaries, there's an extra 10 rand. We are challenging that because we never agreed that they must pay themselves 10 rand.
The minister has also committed to deal with long queues and systems that are constantly down at some pay points. Pulelani Philip, SABC News, Parliament.
The Minister of Water and Sanitation, Gugile Nkutini, described the department he's inherited as a mess. While appearing before the Parliamentary Oversight Committee, he welcomed the inquiry into the financial state of his department. Nkutini says he is working hard to fix it.
Scopa previously referred to this department as being the worst transgressor of any government departments when it came to errant expenditure. It's been described as a department in a complete state of collapse. A full-scale inquiry by Scopa and this committee will soon commence. The minister says he realizes the magnitude of the task he recently inherited. He asked MPs to help him and his team correct the serious situation they find themselves in. One area of concern is the high levels of money owed to the department by municipalities, and their financial hole is deepening as poor infrastructures literally bleed water.
They don't have a way, it's non-revenue water, they aren't recovering it. We are, however, charging them, and the water boards are charging them for that water, regardless of whether they recover or not. So those debt levels which we have will continue to rise unless we have a very serious intervention at a local government level to deal with that failing infrastructure.
Quinty plans to restructure the department. The bulk of senior staff are currently in acting positions with no support structure to assist them in turning the department around. Abra Barbia, SABC News, Parliament.
Well, today is World Press Freedom Day, a day that serves to remind people of the dangers faced by journalists across the globe. The day also seeks to defend media from attacks on their independence and to pay tribute to journalists who have lost their lives in the exercise of their profession. Well, to talk about the importance of this day, we are now joined in studio by Mahlatsi Mahlase, the SANEF chairperson. A very good morning to you. Thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Good morning, and thank you for having us.
And a happy World Press Freedom Day to you.
Well, yes, on one level it is a happy one because as South Africans we can celebrate that our constitution protects the right of journalists. But when we look across the continent and across the globe, that right is not enjoyed by many. We look at our continent, countries like Somalia, journalists continue to be killed for doing their work. We continue to have journalists that are in jail for doing their work in places like Ethiopia, Somalia, and Egypt, etc. And also what is also worrying is that in many of these countries where journalists are actually killed, those that kill them don't get punished, so they continue with impunity. So it's a mixed bag, but it's also a very important day to remind us about why media freedom is quite crucial.
Definitely. Apart from, some of those challenges, what other challenges do you think that journalists rather face?
Look, in South Africa in particular, we have talked about the spike in attacks on journalists. And these attacks not only coming from politicians, like we saw in Parliament in recent months with the EFF's Deputy President Floyd Shivambu attacking a journalist within the parliamentary precinct. But we've also seen journalists being attacked by members of community, especially during protests, violent protests. I mean, just last week, I think it was, when SABC crew, their equipment was actually damaged because community members do not like the fact that media is doing their job, which is to expose them when there's looting of shops like we've seen in places like the Northwest. So we are quite concerned that there is this increasing attacks on journalists, especially coming from community members. And we would like to continue the word to say that ordinary people in South Africa must see media freedom as their rights. It is not just about the journalists being able to do their work, but what we are doing, we're doing on their behalf because our work is in the public interest and the Constitution protects their right to know, and it is the media that brings them that right to know.
Definitely, specifically in that case in point of that journalist, Adrian de Kock, I think it was, that was, allegedly assaulted. How do we go forward in protecting our journalists and ensuring that, essentially their rights are not trampled on going forward?
One of the big things that we have done in SANEF in the past 2 years, because of the spike in attacks on journalists, is to push for journalists to actually lay charges with the police, because we need to come to a point where those that attack journalists are actually prosecuted. But unfortunately, we haven't seen these cases going far. This is despite the fact that some of these incidents are filmed and the videos are widely widely circulated, but we have not seen police actually follow up. And that is the conversation we continue to have with those in authority, to say that when journalists do come forward to lay complaints, we need to see them investigated, and we need to see them ending up in the courts. I mean, one of the things that you remember last year, we spent a lot of money taking the BLF, the Black First Land First, to court when they were going to journalists' homes and they were arresting them and attacking them. And we had to go to court to say that, you know, we are a country that must respect the rule of law and people must abide by the rule of law. And we got that court order that forced the BLF to actually abide by the rule of law. And we've seen a decline in their attempts to attack journalists and harass journalists. And we're hoping that this is part of something that then spreads not just to the BLF, but everybody else in society sees the value of journalism in terms of strengthening our democracy.
Definitely. With that being said, let's talk about the threats that we're currently seeing to press freedom, specifically with the notion that we continuously starting to see a trend in fake news.
Yep.
And we do know, you know, social media somewhat does play a big part in that, in spreading news very, very quickly without necessarily maybe first confirming and finding all facts first.
It is quite a serious one, and we're quite concerned. We've launched quite a massive campaign against fake news in the past year as well, because we're noticing that, you know, those that are only interested in making money, because we have to also accept that there are those that are making money. We're not even calling it fake news, but for misinformation campaign that they actually spread, because every time you and I click, because there is a disturbing headline that says, for example, Archbishop Desmond Tutu has passed on, you will click because of who Archbishop Desmond Tutu is. And that is how they are making money, because they get the clicks, and then the ad revenue actually goes to them. And what we are saying to social media users is that please, please, please be vigilant. One of the things we need them to do is double check the websites, because we've also seen quite popular news websites, fake ones being created that look very similar to, you know, for example, SABC News. There will be a 1 added, and you would look at the colors and assume that this is SABC News. But when you look closely, you see the 1 somewhere there, and you can see that this is not the right website. So we are asking social media users to really, really be careful, and also do not spread it, you know, because once you spread it and share it amongst your friends on Facebook or even on Twitter, then you've got more and more people reading from that news. And it is quite disgusting that, you know, the life of somebody as revered as Desmond Tutu would be used for such cheap gimmick and get us also worried. Another tip that we're giving to social media users is that if none of the big broadcasters or none of the big news organizations are reporting on a particular thing, that is also another sign that says this is possibly fake news. And we have to be quite worried about it, because it's not only just about passing on false information about somebody has passed away. We've seen what has happened in America and how the platform has been used to influence political outcomes in the elections there recently. So we need to continue to be vigilant as South Africans, and also, I mean, to get our readers to also, you know, take a second take, especially on big news that nobody else is reporting on.
Then, speaking of elections, this year's theme is keeping power in check, media, justice and rule of law. Going forward, and also, you know, with our national elections coming up in the next year or so, how do we ensure free and fair reporting and non-biased reporting?
Look, it's important that we continuously have these conversations, especially towards what is expected to be another hotly contested election. Obviously, everybody wants to see themselves in either print or being shown on television, but we have a code of conduct that regulates all of that, you know, and that is where that must be our shield in terms of how do we ensure that we are reporting fairly, equitably, giving everybody access, and making sure that we're giving audiences multiplicity of voices, because that is our responsibility as a media. And the code of conduct that we have, that is, for example, from a SADC point of view, from a local point of view, we follow that to ensure that we give equitable coverage, because, you know, media freedom is the first thing that indicates whether a country's democracy is maturing or not. So we celebrate when, for example, South Africa rises up the media index rank, because if media is not free, the country is not free. And we can see that correlation across the continent, and across the world, that when there is no media freedom, people's individual rights are also not guaranteed. So it is important that as media, we also play that important role of informing South Africans equitably and fairly about decisions that they will make that will impact on, for example, who gets to govern this country in 2019.
Speaking of celebrations, what will SANA be doing to celebrate and commemorate this day?
We do have a couple of events that we are a part of. Some of us are going to be, for example, addressing young students in Soweto as part of, inculcating the message that says that media freedom is your freedom. It is about you, it is about South Africa, but also we're also having debates within the industry about what we see as attacks on our industry. Things like echo chambers within the media, when all of us follow each other and start reporting on the same thing. How do we guard against that? So we have a public debate that we'll be having at our offices at Richmond from 6:30 to 8:30, which we're inviting the public to give their inputs, because we also recognize that the public is the most important, and we would like to hear from them how they see how we do our work and how we take this country forward in terms of strengthening media freedom.
Definitely. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. That was Mahlati Mahlase, the SANEF chairperson, as we talk about World Press Freedom Day, some of the challenges, threats, as well as the gains. We do take a short break here on SABC Newsroom. Do stay tuned.
Special assignment. Crime keeps the society in terror and pain. Why so?
If someone phones me, just phones me, tells me, okay, look, he needs a silver, and I get you all driving, I'll take it.
What pushes normal people to be so hard, heartless, and brutally kill one another?
The other side of it could be more for their own psychological need. It might be part of a sexual fantasy that they have. It could be about power and control.
After proper investigation is followed, the perpetrator gets arrested.
It's part of massive process. And ultimately, they have appealers. I think justice is served.
Emotional scars remain.
We would pay any price to get him back, and the sad reality is that it's gone.
Special assignment. We unravel the truth every Sunday at 21:30.
Welcome back to SABC's Newsroom. Our question we're asking you is, how do you remember Akumzi Jezile? Of course, we saw this huge pouring in of social media tributes coming in on many just learning of the passing of his death. That is our question. And we do know that also the memorial service will be taking place today. Let's have a look at some of the comments. Speechless, may his soul rest in peace. Speechless says, from YoTV, very active and fun, and he was really having a crazy voice, and he was an awesome person. Rest in peace, Akumzi. We will miss you. Bokhile says, I remember him every single time that he was on YoTV. Every day I would watch him laughing, and then Tisetsi on Kuleleke and Gulube on Tempi Pushes. I will always remember him. Lekasa says, I met him at Kempton Park OR Tambo International Airport once. He was always smiling. Definitely gone too soon, and we pass on the regards to all the families who have lost their loved ones in that tragic accident. The poll that we're asking this morning is, would you agree with the Eskom South Africa getting that 35% increase that they are asking for if it means no load shedding? Well, 75% of you are saying no, 25% are saying yes. Just under 400 votes coming in within the first half hour. DP says, I don't agree with Eskom. Electricity is already expensive. They have made empty promises before. They'll take the money and then just continue with load shedding. K for Water says use our VAT money to buy coal instead of bailing out SAA again. And Sidley Lulama says no, the electricity is going to be expensive. Yeah, it definitely is. It's a contentious issue also, specifically with the winter creeping around the corner. Valen Quickly is standing by with some sports. Over to you, Valen.
Thank you very much, Shante. I just don't want load shedding because what we've got coming up in the middle of winter here in South Africa is, of course, the World Cup, which is taking place in Russia. So I don't want the lights going out when we are on a quarterfinal, semi-final or final game. Actually, that's what our question was about today when it comes to sport. FIFA President Gianni Infantino has proposed staging what would effectively be a mini World Cup featuring 8 international teams every 2 years in addition to the traditional events. So the question that we asked at SABC Newsroom this morning is, do you agree with this proposal? Here's what a couple of you had to say. Steve Sidise says, how will the teams qualify for that tournament and how will this mini tournament benefit national teams? And Neo says, but it's only 8 teams, possibly 1 Africa, 1 South American, 1 North American, 1 Asian, 3 Europe, and 1 from down under. Clearly not fair, and the costs will be just as high as that of a complete World Cup. It's a no from me. Michael Big M Sitole says, no, it's going to spoil the main event. And as always, Africa won't be well represented in that mini World Cup. I think Gianni Infantino has been watching too much T20 cricket and wants to bring that idea into football. It's certainly a question that will garner a lot of debate and also the price tag to it, as Gianni Infantino says he's got investors that have promised billions of US dollars to actually make it happen. You can continue to be interactive on social media at SABC Newsroom. But it's back to Shante. She's got your newspapers.
Thank you very much, Valen. Yeah, indeed. Let's have a look at what's making headlines continentally, always starting off here at home. The Star is reporting that Sandile Manswe has been found guilty of the gruesome murder of Karabo Mokoena in a scathing judgment handed down yesterday afternoon in the High Court in Johannesburg. The Swaziland Observer says that retired Royal Swaziland Sugar Corporation Portable Water Resources foreman Henry Mkwanazi drowned at Mvoleni Dam on Tuesday. And finally, Namibia. The Namibian says a plan by the Namibian government to build a 60 million Namibian dollar monument in southern Angola in honor of victims of the Kasinga massacre has failed to take off because of bureaucracy. And let's have a look what we can expect coming up after the break. We sit down with journalists who have, or rather were charged with violating anti-terrorism laws for an article published which questioned the detention of journalists in a certain country. This and more when we come back.
A very good morning to you and thank you so much indeed for choosing Morning Live.
But I want to know that basic thing.
Griselda Lewis, SABC News, in Parktown, Johannesburg.
Zimbabwe, Mzwandile Mbeje, SABC News, Luanda, Angola.
Let's take a look at your market indicators.
Thanks for staying with Morning Live. Let's bring you your sports news.
Let's take a look at your satellite image.
Set the agenda for the day with Morning Live.
The late struggle stalwarts Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela and Albertina Sisulu will be commemorated during Africa Month. EFF leader Julius Malema and NCOP chair Thandi Modise are among South African MPs joining the Pan-African Parliament. Suicide bombers stormed the head offices of Libya's Electoral Commission in Tripoli, killing at least 12 people and setting fire to the building in an attack claimed by a militant group. Leading at the half hour, the late struggle stalwarts Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela and Albertina Sisulu will be commemorated during Africa Month. The launch of Africa Month took place in Cape Town. Africa Month is commemorated in May every year in most states which are members of the African Union. It commemorates the founding of the Organization of the African Unity in 1963, which became the African Union in July of 2002.
A festival of ideas, a celebration of what it means to be African, and a time to engage in cultural exchange while deepening and expanding our knowledge on Africa. The month of May will be used to promote the appreciation and demand for arts and culture.
Africa Month is an important program of the government, started 4 years ago. It's important to emphasize the point that Africa and Africans should know that their duty is to unite, is to integrate the continent itself. What was started by our forebears in the Organization of African Unity should find reflection today on the challenges of today, which is by and large about the economic, social, cultural integration of the continent.
Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela, as well as Mamu Albertina Sisulu, would have both turned 100 years old this year if they were still alive. The Department of Arts and Culture has dedicated this year to them, stating that they will be honored for their selfless contribution towards promoting unity on the continent.
Africa Month is important because we're starting with our schools program, and we have partnered with the Western Cape Education Department and the National Education Department to look at iconic figures in Africa, inspirational figures, so that we can say to our young people that's coming in their thousands to their grade 12s and grade 11 set works, that they can come and engage with what is Africa, and also to become knowledgeable about Africa as itself as a continent.
The understanding of self, identity, and what it means to be African. Various plays here will focus on these issues. They encourage youngsters to know more about Africa and its people. Nomawatu Solwandle, SABC News, Cape Town.
Well, the next session of the Pan-African Parliament sitting in Midrand from May the 7th may have more life than usual, as EFF leader Julius Malema and NCOP chair Thandi Modise are among South African MPs joining the House. Well, perhaps there's at least 80 parliamentarians will be sworn in as new members during the opening ceremony of the 6th ordinary session of the 4th Parliament next Monday. Well, this follows a general election in a number of African states and rotation within delegations, and comes ahead of the election of new leadership for the House.
Sittings of the Pan-African Parliament often go unnoticed, but during the last session, EFF's Floyd Shivambu made his presence felt.
We think, as the Embo Kingdom, that Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma will make a good president of the ANC.
On a point of order, it's totally out of order for people to take advantage of that platform and spread factional politics of the ANC. This is not. This is a platform that must be respected. It must not be abused by people who take advantage of this particular platform. Even the kingship, which is being spoken about here, we do not know about it in South Africa.
The next sitting of the House begins on Monday, and South Africa will be represented by 4 MPs. Santosh Kalian returns, and NCOP Chair Thandi Modise, Thokozile Didiza, Mandlesizwe Mandela and Julius Malema will be sworn in alongside 80 new parliamentarians from the continent. All eyes will be on the election of new leadership for the parliament, likely to replace current President Roger Nkodo Dang of Cameroon and his 4 vice presidents.
To whichever region your turn will come. Secondly, rotation, the other spin-off, which may be an unintended consequences, a positive one. It unites the regions.
As the southern region, we have placed a firm motion that says that let us turn that convention into a rule so that one region does not dominate the leadership of the Pan-African Parliament on successive terms, because it looks like there are those who want to defy the convention now for their own narrow purposes and ambitions. And we are saying that must not be the case.
The 4 South African MPs could be elected to the contested positions. The parliament has 255 members, representing 55 African Union member states that have ratified the protocol that established it. Ntakwana Ngatani, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Well, he has been in and out of prison 8 times. Until his release in February this year, Ethiopian journalist Expropriation Nega had served almost 7 years of an 18-year prison sentence. He was charged with violating the country's anti-terrorism laws for an article he published which questioned the detention of journalists in the country. Media rights group Reporters Without Borders ranked Ethiopia 150th out of 180 countries in the 2017 Press Freedom Index. Our reporter Serik Mani sat with Expropriation Nega just before this year's World Press Freedom Report was released.
It is difficult to read 48-year-old Expropriation Nega's emotions by just looking at him. His answer to my first question, however, easily reveals the man behind a trademark baseball cap. After 6 years behind bars, finally, freedom. How does it feel to be free?
Well, I'm free personally, but my country is not free. So it's mixed emotions.
Brave. Are you just a rabble-rouser, or what is this fearlessness about?
Well, it's about freedom. It's about human dignity. Ultimately, it's about our dignity. This question about the choice between development and freedom. If there is indeed this choice, if there is indeed a choice between development and freedom, I'm sure a majority of our people will opt for freedom. Not only Ethiopia, by the way, in any human setting.
He has been jailed 8 times in the last 15 years for his work as a journalist in his home country, Ethiopia. His latest incarceration was in 2012 when he was sentenced to 18 years in jail for allegedly violating the country's anti-terrorism laws. In February this year, Expropriation was released as part of a large-scale pardon of hundreds of political prisoners and journalists. From his cell, the outspoken critic of the Ethiopian government has watched power change hands 3 times, albeit within the ruling People's Revolution Democratic Front. He's skeptical anything has changed.
We need a system that gives space to all shades of opinion in the country. That has not happened up to now.
While prison may not have broken him, one thing betrays his emotions. Because of being in jail, I could have done something, or I missed out on this.
My child primarily on a personal level. My child has grown without knowing me. Like I said, he was born in prison, and he spent the first year of his life without us.
He cites examples his country can emulate, where democracy has spurred free media and free speech.
Right, freedom of expression, democracy is possible in Ethiopia. There's hope. We're not ambitious. Let me repeat myself and say we're not too ambitious. We have seen democracy working in South Africa, which is very diverse, which has had a very complicated history, and yet democracy has been possible in South Africa, and that's our model.
Expropriation now plans to set up a television station to continue his work in the push for free media. Sarah Kimani, SABC News, Kenya.
Well, staying with African news, suicide bombers stormed the head offices of Libya's Electoral Commission in Tripoli, killing at least 12 people and setting fire to a building in an attack claimed by the Islamic State militant group. The assailants also opened fire on employees of the High National Election Commission, and the attack appeared to have been aimed at derailing efforts to organize elections in Libya by the end of this year, part of a UN-led attempt to unify and stabilize the country after years of conflict and political division. Let's take a short break here on SABC Newsroom. When we come back, Valen Kirtley with all your sporting highlights.
I feel it's a real person.
And it's nutritious and delicious.
It's good. I really like it.
This celebrates being South African. We love our beer, we love our food, we love our music.
For knowing who you are going, you must know where you come from.
I'm excited to be part of this year.
For all your travel trends, catch us every Sunday, 12 midday on Channel 404.
This is your midday report. Good afternoon.
I will be faithful.
I assume as President of the Republic of Kenya.
Let's take a look at how African markets and currencies are performing now.
The central bankers say the success of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies is just a bubble.
Breaking stories, detailed economy and sport. Tune into Midday Report every Monday to Friday from 12 p.m.
Welcome back. You're watching Newsroom. Let's bring you your sports news now. Liverpool survived a Roma onslaught at Stadio Olimpico to reach an 8th European Cup final. Jurgen Klopp's team won the tie 6-7 on aggregate after losing the second leg 4-2 in Italy. The tie equaled the record for the most goals in a two-legged UEFA Champions League knockout contest.
Taking it all in.
After Liverpool's 5-2 win at home in their first leg last week, it was yet another extraordinary match between the English and the Italian outfits. One of Africa's golden sons, Sadio Mane of Senegal, opened the scoring in the second leg of the tie.
Liverpool in an even stronger position.
The match had 3 goals inside the first 25 minutes.
And it's in. Milner in. That's up but not out. In fact, it's back, and it's Wijnaldum who's headed Liverpool in front again.
Liverpool took the 2-1 lead into half-time. However, early in the second half, Edin Dzeko equalized for the Italians.
Jethro! It's 2-2.
And it seemed as if the match was heading for a 2-all draw, but Raja Nainggolan had other ideas.
Nainggolan hits it and it beats Karius.
In stoppage time, Roma won a penalty and that man Nainggolan stepped up and did the rest. But it was too late for Roma.
It was 7-6 on aggregate, which sounds crazy because it is crazy. We came in that competition as a qualifier and are now in the final. And I'm really happy for the boys. I'm really happy for the club. I'm really happy for our fans. It was a fantastic ride so far, and yeah, now we will go to Kiev, which sounds crazy, and but it is the truth.
Liverpool did not rob us of anything because they showed they are a great team with extraordinary players. But if we had reversed the match, they played 45 extraordinary minutes in the first half, and we did the same in the second half. At the end, if we look at the scoring opportunities, I think we were equivalent. The team that won on the details. The same details we neglected.
In what is expected to be a mouth-watering encounter, Liverpool will face Real Madrid in the final of the UEFA Champions League in the Ukraine's capital of Kiev on the 26th of this month. Los Blancos booked their place in the final with a 4-3 aggregate win over German champions Bayern Munich. The Spanish Giants, under the stewardship of Zinedine Zidane, will be eager to win the Champions League for the third year in a row. Mtutuzi Ndlovu, SABC News.
FIFA President Gianni Infantino has proposed staging what would effectively be a mini World Cup featuring 8 international teams every 2 years, in addition to the traditional competition. The tournament, known as the Final 8, would be the climax of a global Nations League competition, which is part of an ambitious plan to reform international football, which FIFA believes could be worth $25 billion in a 12-year cycle. Infantino suggested that the new tournament would take place every October or November of every odd year starting from 2021. He said that a solid and serious group of investors were willing to spend $25 billion on the competition and a revamped version of the Club World Cup, which would also start in 2021 with 24 teams. The letter did not clearly indicate how many slots would be allocated to each region. The plans were sent by Infantino to members of FIFA's decision-making council, which still has to approve them. And former Olympic and triple world 1,500 meters champion Asbel Kiprop of Kenya said he would prove he was clean following British media reports that he had tested positive for the banned blood-boosting drug EPO. The 28-year-old world champion in 2011, 2013 and 2015 and promoted to Olympic gold in 2008 after Bahrain's Rashid Ramzi tested positive for doping was reported by Britain's Press Association to have failed an out-of-competition test. Kiprop posted a link to the story on the Athletics Kenya WhatsApp group and wrote, "I have read the reports linking me to doping. As an athlete, I have been at the forefront of the fight against doping in Kenya, a fight I strongly believe in and support. I would not want to ruin all that I've worked for since my first international race in 2007. I hope I can prove that I'm a clean athlete in every way possible." Kiprop's Italian agent Federico Rosa was quoted as saying he was aware of the reports but had no further details. The latest news is another blow to the reputation of the East African country, the dominant force in middle and long distance running for decades, but widely criticized for substandard anti-doping operations. 3 times Boston Marathon champion Rita Jethro and Olympic marathon champion Jemima Sumgong, also managed by Rosa, were among around 50 Kenyans who have failed doping tests in the last 6 years. And former world number 1 Novak Djokovic is hoping for better results in the coming weeks. Djokovic has suffered early exits in Barcelona, Monte Carlo, Miami and Indian Wells, but says he has been pain-free since Miami. The Serb's confidence has been rocked by a string of poor results after a premature return from elbow surgery. Djokovic's decline started after he won his maiden French Open title in June 2016 to complete a career slam and amass 12 major honors. A string of below-par performances culminated when he had to retire against Czech Thomas Berdych in last year's Wimbledon quarterfinals with an elbow injury, which kept him sidelined until January's Australian Open. After a last 16 defeat by South Korean upstart Hyeon Chung in Melbourne, Djokovic faced another spell on the sidelines following an elbow surgery, and in his own words, he came back too early. He's also rubbished suggestions by several low-key local nutritionists who were quoted by Belgrade media in recent weeks as saying that his meat-free diet is hampering his fitness. That concludes a look at what's been happening in your sports world. Claire standing by to bring you your weather.
Thank you very much, and welcome to the weather desk. Let's take a look now at the satellite image that you've got behind me. We've got just cloudy conditions here over the eastern parts, but it is just dying down as the day progresses. It's a frontal system just moving towards the eastern parts, and we are expecting to see some isolated showers and thunder showers from that. But a closer look here is revealing that we did see some showers here in between PE and East London early on in the morning, and we're expecting it to spread all along the eastern coastline, going towards KwaZulu-Natal, and they're redeveloping there in the afternoon over the interior of KwaZulu-Natal. And the general trend of these storms is moving towards the northeastern parts of the country, leaving behind the central parts starting in the Free State, going towards the rest of the western parts with only clear skies and warm temperatures for today. And speaking of temperatures now, over the western parts of the country, taking a look at Friday. Now this is for tomorrow, expecting Cape Town to peak at 26. This is after a significant drop today. It's at about 20 degrees, and all along the southern coastline we're seeing warm, cool temperatures today and tomorrow becoming warm. Looking at Port Elizabeth, expecting a high of 23 for tomorrow on Friday, including Durban, which is dropping for tomorrow to 22 degrees, while Pretoria is at 24. Tomorrow's temperatures in Harare peaking at 24 with isolated showers. Otherwise, the rest of Zimbabwe, fine and warm temperatures are expected at 29 Beitbridge. Botswana, fine and warm as well, seeing 27 for Serowe. Let's take a look at the central parts of Africa now. In the morning, this is for Thursday at 9 o'clock. You can see the timestamp there. We're seeing clear skies over the DRC, but as the day progresses, the rain is starting to develop. Thunderstorms are coming in, and then late at night, around about midnight, they're dying down over the central interior, only to come back again tomorrow. We can see here just to the northeast of Brazzaville, you can expect a bit of heavier rains in the central parts of Congo. Otherwise, in places like Kenya, you can still expect some rains for today and tomorrow. These are your temperatures. Kigali peaking at 24 with Nairobi, while along the coastal areas from Mombasa going down towards Dar es Salaam, we're seeing some warm temperatures, 28 for both those cities. Lusaka 26, while in the western parts, Cameroon still at a warm 30 degrees. And last but not least, just taking a look at Northern Africa, we're seeing clear skies here and hot temperatures in Egypt and Sudan. Leave your weather here for now. Remember, wherever you go, take your weather with you.
Technology is used for both positive and negative.
Some governments block the internet in times of protest.
With this internet blackout, it's impossible for me to do it, so I have to travel to Douala.
This act is a true violation of the rights of citizens.
In Africa, people are always coming up with innovative ways to use technology to solve some of their problems.
The more interesting piece of technology is actually the artificial intelligence.
AI, it's utilizing data to make your life easier.
On Network, we'll give you Africa's technology and social media news.
Catch Network with Spumelele Zondi every Saturday at 8:30 p.m.
No. Yes. Yes.
Sports Live every Saturday and Sunday at 7:30 p.m.
We make sure to be where news is happening,
both locally and globally. For the latest business news, stay with us.
From South Africa to the world, we've got all your latest sporting news.
Don't miss our weather updates at every hour.
Stay tuned to News Today, Monday to Friday, from 3 to 5:30 p.m. here on SABC News.
Sentencing proceedings in the Zandile Manswe murder case are expected to commence in the High Court in Johannesburg today. A 23-year-old man who allegedly shot and killed a 21-year-old female student will appear at the Durban Magistrates Court soon. Protest action in the south of Johannesburg has been suspended. Citizens are demanding that the Gauteng Human Settlements Department deliver on the 48,000 housing stands it promised communities following last year's violent protests. Meanwhile, police are monitoring the situation on Jake's Goal Drive near Mitchell's Plain in Cape Town.
It was the first time that we were not really as good as we can be, so we needed luck, and that's what we had. But I think over the whole Champions League campaign so far, it's absolutely deserved.
Later in sport, Liverpool coach Jurgen Klopp thanks Lady Luck after his team see past Roma in the UEFA Champions League semi-finals in a record-equaling tie.
Very good morning to you and welcome to Newsroom. I'm Shanti Yankee. So just gone 10 a.m. this morning. Thank you very much for tuning in. We'll keep you updated on the protests that are taking place in and around South Africa, as well as that announcement from Eskom in the next hour. Valen Kirtley is also standing by with some of your sporting highlights. Very good morning to you, Valen. Some Lady Luck in the bulletin later.
Yes. That's what Liverpool manager or Liverpool coach Jurgen Klopp is thanking for after they go through to the final of the UEFA Champions League. Quite incredible to think that 20 goals in total was scored by 4 teams in the UEFA Champions League semi-finals. Absolutely incredible. It always dishes up brilliant action. So the final lineup is confirmed. There's that and so much more coming your way on sport, which we'll be bringing you at around 1:45, the top of the hour. First though, let's get your news with Shantae.
Let's have a look at that top story. Well, protest action across Johannesburg has been suspended. Well, this follows service delivery protests yesterday in various parts of the city, including Eldorado Park, Freedom Park, Lenasia, Deepcliff, Dobsonville and Meadowlands yesterday. Well, protesters are demanding that Human Settlements Department deliver on the 48,000 housing stands that it seemed to have promised communities following last year's violent protests. Well, Gauteng Human Settlements MEC Uhuru Mohala has called for calm and for the community leaders to work with government to resolve their issues. Johannesburg Metro Police says the situation is calm this morning. The situation on Jake's Goal Drive at Mitchell's Plain in Cape Town is also calm at the moment. Despite this, police continue to monitor the area following recent service delivery protests. Well, 1 person died and 2 others were injured during violent protests in the area. Yesterday, the situation was described as tense and volatile. 30 people have so far been arrested for public violence. Jake's Goal Drive between the R300 and Highlands Drive was closed to traffic overnight but has now been reopened. Well, the ANC national officials will meet with the Northwest Premier Supra Mahmupelo in a bid to resolve the ongoing impasse in the province. There have been calls for him to resign from various sectors. The meeting will discuss all available options to try and resolve the problems. Well, after its meeting of the National Working Committee resolved to engage in what it calls constructive discussions with the Northwest Premier, who is also the chairperson of the ANC in the province. The Northwest Province has seen violent protests as calls for the Premier to vacate office intensify. The NWC also welcomed the decision for government to intervene in an effort to stabilize governance in the Health Department. The NWC has also endorsed a decision to hold elective conference in the regions and provinces that are now ready. In some other top stories, sentencing proceedings in the Sandile Mantswe murder case are expected to commence in the High Court in Johannesburg today. Well, yesterday, Mantswe was found guilty of murdering his then 22-year-old girlfriend, Karamo Mokoena. Mangoba Mqunu reports.
A year and 2 days since Mokwena's brutal killing, her boyfriend Sandile Mantswe seemingly unremorseful.
I didn't kill her. Yeah, didn't kill her, man.
Hi guys, my name is Karamo Mokoena.
Mokwena's charred remains were found in a veld in Lyndhurst a day after she went missing. Mantswe denied killing her, claiming she committed suicide. But the court believes his version is far from the truth.
Did not have a tendency to commit suicide, did not attempt it, did not commit it, and that the accused killed her.
The court also found Mantswe guilty of abusing his girlfriend and believes he dumped her body to conceal her death.
Disposed of the body of the deceased by burning it beyond recognition. The accused had, in all likelihood, already killed her in his apartment, if one looks at the photos, and how he carted a body in a dustbin from her apartment to his vehicle. There is no doubt that his intention was to cover up the fact that she was dead and the cause of her death.
Old wounds were reopened for the Mokoena family.
I think Sandile is sick. For me, I think he needs a lot of counseling. He needs to be helped, and maybe reality has not come to the fact that he has done something wrong. But wait until he wears that yellow overall that is written prison. That's when he'll realize that he has done something wrong.
Mangoba Mqunu, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Eskom is expected to reveal plans on how the power utility will avoid load shedding as the country anticipates a spike in use of electricity over the coming winter months. There have been growing concerns that Eskom will not be able to meet the needs of consumers due to reports of coal stockpiles running low at several power stations. For more on this, we now cross live to SABC reporter Yabo Jethro. Very good morning, Chi. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Essentially, what time is the briefing expected to start this morning, and what are some of the main points that we're expecting to hear?
Shante, good morning. Well, in a little just under 30 minutes, the acting or interim CEO of Eskom, Mr. Pagamani Hadebe, is expected to brief the media on the real state of the electricity system. As you have said in your intro, that there has been a lot of jitters and all nervousness about whether Eskom will be able to keep the lights on during the cold winter months that are fast approaching. We have read reports from various energy analysts who spoke about how there is only less than 20 days worth of a stockpile of coal that is in the system. This is, of course, because some of the coal suppliers to Eskom who are linked to the Gupta family are currently under administration, therefore unable to supply Eskom with adequate coal supply. And this, of course, has made a lot of people very, very nervous about will we go back into the load shedding system that we saw back in 2008, 2009 that almost crippled the economy and Eskom itself, and it found itself in the financial trouble that it currently is trying to get itself out of. Mr. Pagamani Hadebe will be addressing the media. As I said, the room here at Franklin Room, the media is starting to, it's already lined up. We are expecting him to take the podium very shortly. There's a lot of interest of this current state of the system. Energy analysts, as I had said earlier on, had warned about the possibility that a load shedding could happen. In fact, comparing it to the day zero in Cape Town, we know that they had serious shortages of water. So it will be watched with a keen eye, both by consumers, both by our viewers at home, and both by businesses who, of course, cannot afford to be short of energy supply of any sort. We will be asking questions as the media to find out what the real state of affairs is and just how deep in trouble Eskom really is. And we, as the SABC, we will be tweeting at SABC News Online. You can follow the tweets. I will be tweeting from here, telling you what the interim CEO is about to say.
Indeed, we've seen in the past, coming months and in the years before that coal supply was not the only issue that, contributed to load shedding. Are we going to see some of those other challenges being brought up and perhaps contingencies being put in place for the 2018 winter months?
Shanti, I'm very confident that because Eskom has a new board, we are unlikely to see other problems creeping up. Remember that there was an issue a couple of months ago, the issue of the liquidity status of Eskom, and we now know that Eskom has gotten a loan of around 20 billion rand, which they desperately needed in order to keep afloat. And we're expecting to find out from Eskom executives just how much that loan or how that loan has been put to use. So to answer your question, absolutely not that we'll find other challenges aside from the issue of the coal problem or the lack of coal supply. As far as I understand, their finances are starting to get better, especially because they got that loan that they desperately needed. And there is a new board that is trying to stabilize the power utility, but we will also find out what exact measures they're taking to make sure that the power utility is staying afloat.
Thank you very much. We'll catch up with you in just a bit, just as that Eskom briefing is set to take place. SABC reporter Diabo Oseto giving us a prelude as to what we can expect from that Eskom briefing within the next half an hour or so. Some African news. So, well, he has been in and out of prison 8 times. Until his release in February this year, Ethiopian journalist Eskom Nega had served almost 7 years of an 18-year prison sentence. He was charged with violating the country's anti-terrorism laws for an article he published which questioned the detention of journalists in the country. Media rights group Reporters Without Borders ranked Ethiopia 150th out of 180 countries in 2017 Press Freedom Index. Our reporter Sarah Kamani sat down with Eskom Nega just before this year's World Press Freedom Report was released.
It is difficult to read 48-year-old Eskom Nega's emotions by just looking at him. His answer to my first question, however, easily reveals the man behind a trademark baseball cap.
After 6 years behind bars, finally, freedom. How does it feel to be free?
Well, I'm free personally, but my country is not free. So it's mixed emotions.
Brave.
Are you just a rabble-rouser, or what is this fearlessness about?
Well, it's about freedom. It's about human dignity. Ultimately, it's about our dignity. This question about the choice between development and freedom. If there is indeed this choice, if there is indeed a choice between development and freedom, I'm sure a majority of our people will opt for freedom. Not only Ethiopia, by the way, in any human setting.
He has been jailed 8 times in the last 15 years for his work as a journalist in his home country, Ethiopia. His latest incarceration was in 2012 when he was sentenced to 18 years in jail for allegedly violating the country's anti-terrorism laws. In February this year, Eskom was released as part of a large-scale pardon of hundreds of political prisoners and journalists. From his cell, the outspoken critic of the Ethiopian government has watched power change hands 3 times, albeit within the ruling People's Revolution Democratic Front. He's skeptical anything has changed.
We need a system that gives space to all shades of opinion in the country. That has not happened up to now.
While prison may not have broken him, one thing betrays his emotions.
Because of being in jail, I could have done something, or I missed out on this.
My child primarily on a personal level. My child has grown without knowing me. Like I said, he was born in prison, and he spent the first year of his life without us.
He cites examples his country can emulate where democracy has spurred free media and free speech.
Right, freedom of expression, democracy is possible in Ethiopia. There's hope. We're not ambitious. Let me repeat myself and say we're not too ambitious. We have seen democracy working in South Africa, which is very diverse, which has had very complicated history, and yet democracy has been possible in South Africa, and that's our model.
Eskinda now plans to set up a television station to continue his work in the push for free media. Sarah Kimani, SABC News, Kenya.
Well, for more on World Press Freedom Day, we are joined in studio by SABC News foreign editor, Ms. Sophie Mokoena. Very good morning to you. Thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Good morning.
In listening to the interview with Mr. Nega, he made a very profound statement saying that I'm free, but my country is not free, upon his release from prison. Essentially, are African and international journalists free?
Some are, some are not. As you have indicated in that insert, you have a journalist from Ethiopia expressing his views in terms of what's happening in his country. We know very well in recent times there has been problems in Ethiopia, even though now you have a new president, but it looks like the harassment of journalists and the media in particular is continuing. I've been to that country many times. It is very difficult to get access to internet, even to file stories. Even when you are there to cover the African Union, you are confined in the African Union precinct in terms of coverage. If you want to cover anything around Ethiopia, it is such a challenge. Therefore, I think Ethiopia is not the only country where you have these challenges. There are many countries on the continent where you have challenges, but I think the media and the journalists on the continent must continue to fight for freedom of expression. I'm only disappointed that even though we have an institution that is supposed to protect and defend media freedom on the continent, I'm talking about the African Editors Forum, at times they are found wanting. You must get someone outside the continent to push if there are problems. They take time to respond, and I think this has to change.
What is the significance of press freedom and celebrating and commemorating this day?
It is very important that we always remember that as journalists, there are other journalists who are not able to do their work freely, and we must always remind those who are in authority that that cannot be right. But also as journalists, we must always remember that freedom comes with responsibility. Therefore, as we report, as we tell the story, we must ensure that it's factually correct, it is balanced, and we must always give those who are affected a right to reply.
Let's just discuss the figures. More than 50 journalists, reportedly, according to the report, were slaughtered just in 2017 alone. And then we've also seen incidences here at home where journalists are being physically attacked, and where we're seeing the evidence of that making the rounds on social media. What can be done to protect journalists? And they're just trying to get the information and show them public interest.
Society must be aware that journalists are there to do their work, and therefore they must be protected. But above all, governments or politicians and authorities must ensure that they protect freedom of press. And at the end of the day, even journalists themselves and media houses must ensure that as we do that in a responsible way, free, fair, balanced, and also ensure that we give those who are affected right to reply. For South Africa in particular, it is a problem during the protest. I think communities must be educated that when journalists are there, they are there to do their work. You'd recall a week ago in Northwest, our team was attacked, which is bad. I mean, I know I was once caught in a crossfire, or we were attacked while we were covering a story in Johannesburg by hooligans. And you can't, you have to ensure that journalists are protected. But I think journalists themselves, we must also take extra precaution when we are covering stories in a volatile situation or at night.
Now, Ms. Sophie, of course, you know, you're a journalist, now you're an editor, but, you know, when you started, you were on the ground. You've often shared those memories that you have in covering the stories of Nelson Mandela as well as Cyril Ramaphosa and, you know, his rise, his political rise. What do you think are some of the gains as a journalist in the work that you've done, in the freedom that you've had, and the space that you've had, specifically over the past democratic years?
A lot has changed, particularly for women. While we are having a serious problem of gender disparity in terms of salaries, even in South Africa, if you can do a study or a research in media houses, you'll find that female journalists are not properly compensated or paid. You always have your male counterpart earning more than, you know, women in particular. Not only in Europe, where we saw women standing up in London, but even here on the continent, in South Africa, it is happening. Secondly, at least now we have many young, black, female political reporters, not only in politics, in sports, economics, and many other important domains or sectors, which is good. But I think a lot still needs to be done to transform the newsrooms, particularly on issues of ownership. We may have many female editors, but how many women are owners of those media houses or those newsrooms? How many women? Do we have any television station owned by perhaps women? A radio station? Nothing, nothing.
Yeah.
It's still a male domain.
Yeah, it definitely is. I was speaking to Mahlase from SANEF this morning. She said that SANEF, in commemoration of World Press Freedom Day, they will be hosting a debate. They're also opening it up to the public. What is the SABC going to be doing to celebrate today?
We will ensure that we cover the story extensively, as we have started this morning. We'll continue during the day. Because it's International Press Freedom Day, we will cover international stories as well. For example, tonight when you watch bulletins, you'll see that we'll be in Russia to look at media freedom in Russia, where there has been problems under Putin. We'll go to Europe to look at Germany, and many journalists fleeing their countries, moving to Europe with the hope that they'll be able to practice their craft much better. We'll go to Washington. America is experiencing problems. Donald Trump is not kind to journalists. We saw what happened during the press corps dinner in the US, and the tension has escalated. Then we will have our own Shawan Price piece. You know, he is the president of the foreign correspondents at the UN. We are hoping to speak to him later today to give us an overview around the globe in terms of media freedom, but also to share his thoughts in terms of how the UN is supporting media, but also perhaps the message from the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, on this Press Freedom Day. And of course, local will cover the stories extensively.
Definitely. Thank you very much for your time this morning. And that was SABC News foreign editor Sophie Mokoena giving us more on the importance of World Press Freedom Days, as well as what one can look forward to come tonight on some of those stories and packages from the SABC. Let's have a look now at some international news. South Africa and Japan will host a major business conference today in Johannesburg. This comes on the heels of the India Summit Business that was hosted last week. The Japan-Africa Public-Private Economics Forum will take place for 2 days at the Sandton Convention Center. More than 100 dignitaries from Japan are expected at the event. Well, trade relations between the two countries go back over 50 years. Earlier, SABC News spoke to Executive Director of the Japan External Trade Organization, Hiroyuki Nemoto, ahead of the event.
This forum is to encourage private sectors lead the African business success through more collaboration between Japanese and African businesses.
Now, Japan regards Africa as not only an aid recipient, but a consumer market. So what kind of products are you looking at exporting to Africa, and what can Africa expected to export back to Japan?
Yeah, now so we have many Japanese companies doing business here, such as the automobile companies. So I believe that you enjoy some Japanese car and the motorcycles. And on the other hand, there's some African products such as the insurance product, new product, will be coming to the Japanese market as a new product.
Okay. Let's talk about the event itself. How is the program of the event structured?
Yes, so as I mentioned, so we will welcome the high-level government ministers from Japan, South Africa, and other countries for the plenary session, which will be held on May 3rd. And after that, so we will have the business discussion, inviting the business executives from Japan. More than 100 business executives will come from Japan to this forum.
Okay, so what will be the different focus areas within the forum?
Different area, yes. So we will focus on the financial sector as well. So to progress our business and with the African companies, so we have the technology and also the skills, but we need a kind of the financial support. So how we can build up that kind of the support system? So we would like to talk about the possibility of that.
Yeah, and since the event will take place over 2 days, are there any plans afoot to take this particular event to the different countries on the continent?
So many South African countries are coming. So as a business people and the ministers as well, and also we will have the African exhibition in the during the conference. So we will exhibit some African products to the Japanese business executives as well. On each other more and more.
Yeah.
So Jethro is, we have the task to do that. So we dispatch every information on Africa, especially South Africa, to the Japanese people. So we hold seminars in Tokyo, Osaka, blah, 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 so in Japan. So that many Japanese people come to know and understand what is going on in African continent.
Now we talk of trade relations between Africa and Japan. Are there any perhaps focus areas that need to be, that we need to lavish attention on, like the social or the civic relations between Africa and Japan?
So we Jethro treat every kind of the field. I mean, do not focus on the special industry, but so we believe that you have the potentiality of the consumer goods and as well as the manufacturing sectors such as the automobile.
Okay. So what are some of the products that Africa is expected to export to Japan? I know Japan is heavy on IT sector, on the automobile sector.
Yes, so actually we enjoy the medical service in South Africa. So in Japan, so long queue to take us medical services. Right. But now in South Africa, we can enjoy the very good quality of the medical services.
The only way to pour the perfect beer, this professional barman would tell you, is into a glass tilted at exactly 45 degrees. Oh, bless you. Bless you, sir. Bless you again. Well, we'd say the perfect way to pour a beer is at this angle, straight into your mouth. Tops its bar. Good beer, good advice, no Ponzi beer stuff.
Over 5% of the world's population, or 360 million people, has disabling hearing loss.
Sometimes babies are born that can't hear. Yeah. And especially during the pregnancy where there's some infections that mom could pick up that can actually transmit that damage to the ear, and those children can be born deaf.
I don't look at myself as a disabled person. I looked at myself as Bruno, not with a disability. I don't have barriers. I use South African Sign Language because I have a language.
And unfortunately, we need to talk to the teenagers and the young people out there. I know it's now fine to go to the concerts and listen to that loud music, but you're actually damaging those little hair cells all the time. And you're not going to pay the price now. You're going to pay the price when you turn 45, 50. And then all of a sudden, we're going to see the damage done.
For all your health news, join Health Talk every Saturday from 9 to 10.
The late struggle stalwarts Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela and Albertina Sisulu will be commemorated during Africa Month. EFF leader Julius Malema and NCOP chair Etandi Modise are among South African MPs joining the Pan-African Parliament. Suicide bombers stormed the head offices of Libya's Electoral Commission in Tripoli, killing at least 12 people and setting fire to the building in an attack claimed by a militant group. Well, the late struggle stalwarts Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela and Albertina Sisulu will be commemorated during the Africa Month. The launch of Africa Month took place in Cape Town. The month is commemorated in May every year in most states which are members of the African Union. It commemorates the founding of the Organization of African Unity in 1963, which became the African Union in July of 2012.
A festival of ideas, a celebration of what it means to be African, and a time to engage in cultural exchange while deepening and expanding our knowledge on Africa. The month of May will be used to promote the appreciation and demand for arts and culture.
Africa Month is an important program of the government, started 4 years ago. It's important to emphasize the point that Africa and Africans should know that their duty is to unite, is to integrate the continent itself. What was started by our forebears in the Organization of African Unity should find reflection today on the challenges of today, which is by and large about the economic, social, cultural integration of the continent.
Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela, as well as Mamu Albertina Sisulu, would have both turned 100 years old this year if they were still alive. The Department of Arts and Culture has dedicated this year to them, stating that they will be honored for their selfless contribution towards promoting unity on the continent.
Africa Month is important because we're starting with our schools program, and we have partnered with the Western Cape Education Department and the National Education Department to look at iconic figures in Africa, inspirational figures, so that we can say to our young people that's coming in their thousands to their grade 12s and grade 11 set works, that they can come and engage with what is Africa, and also to become knowledgeable about Africa as itself as a continent.
The understanding of self, identity, and what it means to be African. Various plays here will focus on these issues. They encourage youngsters to know more about Africa and its people. Nomawatu Solwandle, SABC News, Cape Town.
Eskom is expected to reveal plans on how the power utility will avoid load shedding as the country anticipates a spike in use of electricity over the winter months. There have been growing concerns that Eskom will not be able to meet the needs of consumers due to reports of coal stockpiles running low at several power stations. Let's join the briefing live.
On the passage outside here, we have 2 fire extinguishers. We can use that fire extinguishers to extinguish the fire, only those who trained to fight the fire. On those 2 assembly points, I mentioned 1 and 2, you wait there until our safety officers come and address us if the building is clear, and then we come back to the same room, and continue with the business of the day. I thank you. Are there any questions? Thank you very much. Enjoy your day.
Thank you so much, Mr. Makoba. We're going to proceed with our program. Before I call Mr. Pagamani Hadebe to come and give us the keynote speech or presentation, for those who are using the Wi-Fi facilities, the password and the username are media, the word media, both for the password and for the password and the username. So without any further ado, I'm going to call on Mr. Pagamani Hadebe to give us the presentation for the day.
Board members of Eskom, my colleagues at Eskom, members of the media, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good morning. And thank you so much for making time to come and see us today. We felt it prudent and important that we resuscitate, we revitalize the status of the system briefing. We want to do so, ladies and gentlemen, because we felt that we have to keep the nation informed. We also want to raise issues from our own side. But before I can start presenting what we have planned here, I think this gathering here today comes at the right time. It comes at the right time in the sense that we have just completed the non-deal roadshow, both for domestic and foreign investors. So I thought it appropriate to cover at a very high level some of the issues that were discussed in those deliberations. The first thing before I go and explain those was a positive feel that we picked up in our engagement with the investors. A feel about the country and a positive feel again about Eskom, and that is positive. But there are 5 key issues that I would like to touch on that seem to dominate those discussions. The first one was the latest, where are we on corporate governance? The second one is funding status. Where are we in funding? The Eskom. The third one was a comprehensive long-term strategy. The fourth one was the coal challenging issues and what caused it. That was the main thing. Then the 5th issue came towards the end of our roadshow, foreign roadshow, I think because of the coverage in South Africa. It was asking us about load shedding. Is it imminent? So some of these issues will be covered in the presentation, but I thought as a point of departure, I'm going to touch on those things. Corporate governance. We told investors that we continue to do the investigations and we're taking decisions whenever we find wrongdoing. We continue on reviewing the contracts, 5,000 of them, and we have covered a lot of ground because we feel that we have to make sure, as the demands or as the request by the board, that we have to ensure that everything is above the board. In those discussions, from time to time, we ended up discussing the issue of McKinsey and Trillion, which seems to dominate the whole stories. And we were able to answer that, yes, McKinsey has committed to pay back the 1 billion, that 2 trillion has not shown any indication whatsoever of doing so, that the issue is at the High Court, and that the asset forfeiture is very happy to have this money coming to the Eskom. I'm saying these things because from time to time, we'll be expected to present the the developments on these contracts. The third issue that we have done is what we're supposed to do is lifestyle audits. When we started, we thought by now we'll have completed this process, but it has proved quite challenging on legal processes, and we're hoping we'll be starting next week because there are certain things that needed to be done. When it comes to whistleblowing, we have 239 cases, as it has already been reported, of whistleblowing from January as at the end of March. Out of those, 75 have been investigated. And out of that 75, 39, we feel that there should be disciplinary processes. The whistleblowing facility is important for two reasons. The first thing it indicates that the staff members are now willing to use our control systems, which is something they were not that comfortable in using. That's the first thing. But the second thing, in line with the board directive, wherever the investigation has been undertaken, we made sure that we make the necessary decision. So it's a commitment that we made to the staff that come and tell us what happened, we'll take action. The second issue is funding requirement. Since January, we've been able to raise a gross borrowing of 43 billion. We are beginning to see investors coming in, both domestic and foreign. We'd like to see more, and we'll still engage with them. On the comprehensive long-term strategy, there's a lot of work that has been done. The agreement between the board and the Minister of Public Enterprises is that the process should be completed at least the latest in September. There's a mutual agreement between management and the board that things have to be done differently from now on if we are to ensure that this institution is sustainable. We have to maximize revenue. Municipal debt is a challenge that we are facing, and accordingly, we have visited 4 parliamentary committees, and our story has been consistent and very same. If we don't deal with this issue, it's going to be a challenge. And secondly, investors are worried about this. They want us to show that we have the power to take decisions. And accordingly, we will deal with those municipalities that do not pay. And we have support. We have had support from Parliament. The third one is about our cost. We need to deal with our cost, both operational and CapEx, and we are looking into that. Then the issue of coal challenges and why are we here? It's a number of events that have taken place, but I'll give you just a high level as to why we're where we are. The first thing, of course, was the underinvestment in cost-plus mines. That had an impact, but it had been decided upon due to capital constraints. This put a strain in the supply of coal. Secondly, there was an issue on Tegeta that did not meet their targets. And 3, coal mines were affected. With that, we had to get coal from internal and it affected others. But now, Tegeta is under business rescue, so that has impacted us. The previous board and management, of course, had tried to deal with the issue. They raised the issue with the National Treasury, but there were corporate governance and compliance issues that National Treasury was worried about. It took a bit longer. The new board, which came in January, by February, at least was able, through the engagement, to convince the National Treasury on approving this. This was approved, but the process of coal procurement is a bit different than, say, going to the shop and buying the bread. The process is not as simple as going to the shop to buy the bread. But we have done quite a number of things in that respect, and we are beginning to see the results of that. Because during the presentation, further as we are concluding our roadshow, load shedding our view is that we are producing 46,000 megawatts of electricity in South Africa. The planned and unplanned outages is roughly about 10,000 or so. And that leaves us with resources of about 3,000 that we can make use of. We think that holding all other things constant, as economists say, we are not going to have any load shedding. We think that that problem could come to bear, whether it's natural, whether one big power station has huge problems and it cannot continue. But as we'll show the numbers here, we are comfortable on what we have, and we'll continue to do so. That is a very high level discussions with the investors, and it does highlight some of the challenges that we're going to talk about. Please allow me to get into the presentation. You will note, and I want to emphasize this, that while Eskom is facing some challenges, the operational performance of this institution is acceptable. I'm saying this before because I'm confident of what you're going to see. The situation in South Africa would have been worse if Eskom had severe challenges also on these operational performances. Please allow me to go through the presentation. The summary, as you can see here. Energy availability, an improvement from last year, from 77 to 78%. Capacity that had been added on the national grid, 2,387 megawatts. New transmission lines, 722. New substation transformer capacity, 2,510. During the year under review, we have managed to electrify more than 215,000 clients. Of course, we are looking at elasticity demand because we feel that, as I've already indicated, that's an area that we have to maximize. The load shedding issue I've already touched on, and we think, and that's important, that is not likely. On operational highlights, we've spoken about energy available factor, 78, although I must highlight that the planned and unplanned outages that took place during the last quarter of the year from December have changed the scenario. Otherwise, the numbers will be better, but we'll talk about that. Planned maintenance, 10.4 against target of 10%. Unplanned maintenance, 10.2. And new connections, we've spoken about that. We've spoken about new build capacity, 2,387 megawatts. And commission transform capacity is 2,510. Transmission, again, 722. Could we have done better than this? Yes, surely we could have done better. Are we excited? Yes, there is an element of excitement, but we can do more. Bringing the business into perspective. Year-end planned maintenance was 10.4 compared to the target. And the maintenance, again, on generation is 10.2. On transmission, when you're talking about systems minute, that is less than a minute, we did the best we have done. That was the performance is 2 minutes, 9 seconds. On the target of 3 minutes, 53 seconds. We had a zero major incident during 2017-18. In other words, there was, during the year, no incident where the correction took more than a minute. That's a great achievement of those people that on day-to-day basis wake up and go and do the work. We've spoken about the distribution. When it comes to Medupi, yes, there have been teething problems on the new business. But Unit 5 and Unit 4 was commercialized on 3 April and 28 of November. Each have an installed capacity of 794 megawatts. Kusile, commercialized 30 August 2017. Installed capacity 799. Medupi 3 Kusile 2, synchronized to the national grid 24th of March and 8th of April. Transmission, we're speaking about 722 kilometers transmission lines that we installed. We are speaking about 2,510 MVA transformer capacity. We want to highlight that on the unplanned maintenance, you will see a bigger increase or an increase in the last quarter of the year. This was because of unplanned outages that we experienced, but we'll come back to that. So, in March 2018, UCLF increased by 16.6%. That was primarily because of Lear 3 units. You'll see it in the numbers. On the maintenance side, the year-end planned maintenance, again 10.4, against a target of 10. Slightly down from last year. UCL, compared to the year before, 10.2 and 9.9. OCGT is 0.56 for the year. I want to touch on this, which is less than the 1% target. Now, I do agree, and we do agree with the team, that the OCGT during the last quarter has increased, but we'll cover that. But some of the things that have come up in the media, that we are spending $1 billion a month on this are wrong. This is the amount that was spent, which is 320, against the budget of 620. Environmental issues which remain important. Particulate emissions is 0.27 against the target of 0.34. On the liters kilowatts hour, again is 130 against a target of 137. Then this is a big story. The generation achieved on the available factor, energy available factor. Yes, it has come down. From 82, it's come down to 69. But we can provide reasons for that. The first one is the increase on planned outages. And those planned outages gain momentum in summer, November, December, as you can see going forward. That is because Eskom always prepares for winter in summer. That's what they do. But there's a second reason also that is in here. And that is up during, oh, sorry. Where am I now? Yeah. During this period of time here, the ability of Eskom to access the financial market was rather limited. And accordingly, when the new board came in and there was access, we then began to increase the planned outages, some of them that should have been done before. there is an increase on unplanned. The majority of it is teething problems of the new systems that we have, Medupi and Kusile. But over and above that, we had 2 power stations that were giving us problems here. You will see that by the end of the year, the unplanned had increased to 16.6%. That was because Letabe, which we started working on it in November. We're supposed to have completed it here, and we didn't, and accordingly it moved to unplanned. However, the story is a bit different now. 2 of their units have been dealt with. So in May, these numbers will be different. But the story is different. So the OCG usage will reflect this. In other words, it will reflect that towards the end of the financial year, there was an increase in outages, and we then had to find the substitute, as reflected here. This is us. It increases a bit December, January. Then there's this huge, again, mainly because of Letabe. But you then see, because of the 2 units that have been brought back to operations, this in April has since come down. And again, this is important. It's 320 million against the budget of 620. So where are we with coal? About 2 weeks and last week, we were saying there are 7 power stations that do not have sufficient coal. That is, it covers 20 days. We're happy to say now there are 6. Komati is now back on stream. And if you are lucky, my colleagues told me that I should not be too optimistic, but if we are lucky, and if it works according to the projections, we are hoping that in 1 to 2 weeks' time, that number will have decreased to 5. So how many days of the stockpile do we have? We have 35 days against the 2008 year before the challenges that we were facing, where we had the stockpile only for 12 days. If we include Medupi and Kusile, the stockpile increases to 65 days. Yes, we have challenges on coal. I've already spoken about that, but we do have a recovery plan. We are sourcing additional coal from the suppliers, and we continue to do so. And we are moving coal within our own power stations. Importantly, we are discussing with the Together resource practitioners on increasing or on having the coal supplied at Hendrina. These are all the things that we are doing to make sure that come winter, we have sufficient coal. If you can look this through a bigger picture, I will concentrate on the peak period. You will know that we will use OCTG primarily during this period of time and in August up until December. So we'll see gas being used. However, we're still far from the reserves up there. That assumes, of course, that the unplanned does not increase by a bigger percentage. You know, we're all entitled to our opinions as to the challenges that we are facing. My limited knowledge of what is happening here doesn't tell me that on Friday we are not going to have electricity in South Africa. it does indicate that we are going to make use of gas from time to time. And that's a fact. On the distribution side, the system's average interruption duration index and the system's average interruption frequency index, there has been growth, there has been development. Distribution lines are still above 350,000, and we are maintaining those. And by the way, globally, we're one of the biggest. We have one of the biggest distribution lines. There is a reliable network. And the electrification of 215, we feel that we can do more than that. And we are talking to the Department of Energy with that regard. The two have been covered. I just want to highlight that during winter, we tend to have some outages because of the overload, network overload. This is the result of illegal connections, vandalism, and equipment theft. We are working on that. But on the customers, we have increased revenue, and we are targeting to increase this even more. 148 power stations, power customers have been connected. That's 1,361 gigawatts. 26,000 small customers were connected. We did exceed the limit, we did exceed our target when it comes to installing prepaid meters in Sandton, Midrand, and Soweto. And we'll continue to do so. The universal access, the target was 201, we're 215, and we have since communicated to the department that we're willing to take even more. Transmission. We have already spoken about systems minute, that we have achieved the best ever reported performance in 2 minutes, 09 seconds, against a target of 3 minutes, or 4 minutes, close to 4 minutes, and that there was 0 major incident. And the number of interruptions were reduced to 24 against a target of 34. On the plant performance, almost 99% of the planned work was executed on maintenance. With regard to excellent line fault performance per 100 kilometers, again, 186. That was achieved against 2.2 target. Substation plant reliability, we were close to a target. With regard to IPPs, we are talking 9,479 gigawatt hour against 2017-18, where we had 7,227. That's a whopping increase of 31%. Let's talk about the new build. We have already spoken about the challenge and the teething problems that we had. Just want to highlight that in 5 years' time, since 2015, we put in 4,613 megawatts. We are hopeful and confident that in another 5 years, we'll put in 6,382. That's an increase of 38% or so. Since 2005, we have put this 10,750. Kusile will add another 800 megawatts. Now, we are not saying it's smooth sailing. And neither are we saying that we are not encountering challenges and problems as we do this. But if you try to analyze Eskom, you take the operational performance outside of all the challenges that we have, you begin to see that we have the largest chunk of people in this 47,000 people employed by Eskom have done the best they could. And that we get clouded by those few individuals that have taken upon themselves that instead of putting the country first, they put themselves first as to what is good for us. But Eskom is more than that. And this is what this story tells. Let me conclude my conclusion. Should we celebrate? Should we then say we're safe? Still too early. But I can tell you without any benefit of doubt that we are safe. What we need to do is to encourage those people that have delivered this to continue doing so on the one side, and on the other, deal with those that have done what is not needed, the wrong stuff. Because if you do that, you then create a kind of a culture that inculcates performance that is even far better than this. That is what South Africa needs. That is what South Africa deserves. And that is why we have been employed to do this job. We need to take painful, difficult decisions to do so. And there are quite a number of things that have to be done for us to achieve that goal. We need to deal with municipal debt. We need to deal with our own sustainable model to ensure that Eskom lives another 95 years. We leave a viable institutions for those that come after us. We need to concentrate on finalizing the long-term strategy of Eskom. Because once we do so, then it will be clearer to every South African as to what the future of energy is in this country. We are confident, resilient, that we are on the right trajectory. And we know that if we can say that Eskom doesn't have challenges, we'll be lying to ourselves. But we are dealing with those challenges. So as South Africans, yes, the environment is not the best, it's not the ideal, but it's not dead. It's an environment we can work and build this country through. And with those few words, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Harebe. This is now the opportunity for us to maybe ask any clarity-seeking questions or even commendations if you have, because you never know. I'm going to take, I would say, tranches of 4 so that we can get through the questions as many as we can, and then we will take it from there. So you'll tell us as to who you are, the organization you represent, and then you will give us your questions. We have a team of executives from Eskom, plus senior managers as well, and I see also one board member, but primarily the session is for the executives. So yeah, I'm sure we are ready to answer all the questions that you have. I'm going to start on my right-hand side and then move as we go along. So I'm going to, on the left side of the right side. So I'm going to start with Harry, and then I'll do Antoinette, and then I see Chris, and then I'll take, yes. Joy, yes. So those are the, I think, 4, if I'm not mistaken, that I'll take, and then we'll move on to the other ones.
Hi, it's Heidi Jokos from ENCA. I just need to understand what your plan is in terms of, you guys say that you're going to source coal from power stations that currently have a surplus. What is going to happen to those power stations when they run out of coal? If you can just give some clarity on how you're going to manage that.
Thank you, Harry. Antoinette?
Antoinette Slabert from MoneyWeb. Just a few questions. The first is, how far is the disciplinary action against Ms. Susan Daniels? And if you could just update us on whether there are any other outstanding disciplinary measures against senior managers. And then the lifestyle audits, what exactly is the challenge that you're talking about? Why only next year, if I understood you correctly, and who is going to do these lifestyle audits? And then the last question, what was the energy availability factor of the renewable IPPs in the previous financial year?
Thank you, Antoinette. I'm going to make a small plea that where possible, let's limit ourselves to 3 questions each. We will do another round. Chris?
Good morning, Chris Yelland from EE Publishers. Phakamani, if I can ask you, we've heard about what I would think are crisis management actions in coal, procuring short-term coal from here, there, and everywhere that you can get your hands on it. But can you tell us what long-term plans Eskom is putting in place, especially your policy going forward on cost-plus mines, as well as your plans for a coal supply to Kusile, which I understand there is no plan long-term yet, after many, many years. So what we're seeing is just short-term emergency planning and crisis management, but what is being done long-term to ensure the sustainability? If I can ask while I'm got the mic also, can you please clarify exactly the position at Matla Power Station, which was not included in your list of 7 problem stations? I was promised an answer as to how much usable coal days there are at Matla, but I've never had an answer. Can you clarify that for me? Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Joy?
This is a question for Mr. Hadebe. Could you please clarify the exact position of Mr. Abraham Masango? And then in terms of the misconduct of the various officials that Eskom has been looking at, will those results be released? Will the South African public get to know who and what they've done and who they are? And then my last question, in terms of the cost overruns on Kusile and Medupi, will there be any serious investigation or censure of the senior Eskom officials who presided over those billions of rands of cost overruns? Thank you.
Thank you, Joy. See, you can answer from there, and this will apply to all the other executives as well. We also have roving mics that will be given to the other people who are not seated at the main table. Mr. Hadebe.
Thank you. My colleagues will help me here. The issue of the coal, taking surplus from those that have, it's not about that only. We are also talking to the suppliers that are giving us additional from what we ordered. So it's a collection of things. We are going to those that will give us more. And in the meantime, we can also share within our own power stations. But the main thing is we have requested National Treasury, for example, to approve a 1 million ton delivery of coal. And that has been approved, and we're doing so. So it's buying mainly on this side and the surplus on the other side. And Susan Daniels, the investigation has not taken place, and I'll be honest, because we've been trying to finalize the data, and it's been very difficult to do so. It's just simple as that. And I want to highlight something that was discussed at the parliamentary committee, one of the parliamentary committees. The new board and myself do not have anything against her at all. In fact, we don't have any relationship. She had been suspended when we joined. The truth of the matter is that there are issues that came up that we wanted to answer. There are questions that we wanted to answer. That's the whole thing. The lifestyle audit, no, the lifestyle is going to start next week. It should have started, but because of a legal process, it's just taking longer. But I've been informed that it's going to start in earnest next week. And we're going to get a private company that I think I should have signed by today, that they start. So the process is ongoing. Renewable.
Okay, on the renewable IPPs, the average load factor for the previous financial year, 2017-18, was 31.5%.
Okay.
Just to clarify that, like my colleague said, it's 31.5, but Antoinette, we don't use EAF like conventional fleet. We use what we term a load factor. As a matter of fact, the load factor was between 32 and 35, but some of them on the average came out around 31, but it differs for wind and PV. They're in that range because PV obviously only runs for a certain amount of time.
Yeah, my colleagues will comment with regard to coal crisis management. Chris, let me start. I want to say that we have set a budget for the cost plus over the next 3 years. We know that the impact of that, or the positive impact, will come in 2-3 years' time, but we have started that process because that's a long-term view that we have taken. It's not just about the crisis management. Yes, we're in crisis, but there's a long-term plan. And we intend to raise 100 million tons of coal, and that tender has already been out. But I think my colleagues will add on.
So, as the chief executive has said, there's three sort of streams running in terms of coal. One is, like the chief executive said, when the new board came in, they approved a mandate for us, approved with National Treasury, that we source coal for 2018-19, which is around 18.4 million tons. That's now gone through the commercial process, busy evaluating, and as we conclude contracts, we start signing those contracts and deliveries start. In addition to that, we've also sort of asked National Treasury to give us permission to do confined sourcing of about 3 million tons, just as a buffer for this next 3 months as we go through the process of procuring coal, because one of the things that we are very, very firm about is we will not procure coal that results in any compliance issues. We will make sure that whatever coal we procure is followed by proper governance process. Where there are any governance issues involved, we will follow a transparent process and seek approval to get those contracts concluded. In addition to that, we've gone out for a long-term tender for the next 5 years for coal. That RFP has come in and is busy under evaluation. There was also a question about Kusile. We have actually now following the government process to secure the coal for the life of Kusile for 60 years. That has gone through our Eskom tender process. It will now follow its process. So we are procuring. And that was addressing the long-term issues. And the Matla Power Station has a healthy stockpile. What you mean by usable and unusable is that there is some low-quality coal. That coal is mined from seams that come from the Matla mine that is of low quality. We can use it at Matla. We can burn it, but what happens is it does result in load losses and a high ash content. But to get a bit of more detail around our long-term issues and maybe give slightly more detail than I gave without going into commercial issues, maybe we can ask my colleague Andre van Heerden from Primary Energy just to expand on Chris's question about, besides the crisis management now, there is a plan for long-term.
Okay, thank you. I think the question.
Andre.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Deba. I think you've touched on basically the major impacts that we are looking at. The one is to, as Deba have said, is that with the new board, we have now we've received some approvals to start investing in the cost plus mines. There's 2 of the cost plus mines contracts that's expiring within the next, let's say, one that's expiring in the next 24 months, and another one that's expiring around about 2020. Those contracts are now being renegotiated. And then in terms of our short-term or our shortfall coal requirements for the next 5 years, we are sitting with an average shortfall of about 15–16% per annum. We have gone out on a 100 million ton RFP already in the beginning of last year. Those tenders are all in the process of being evaluated. We will not see a lot of coal flowing from that 100 million ton coal in the next 12 months because it was absolutely aimed at the longer term and to basically give the market a view of what is Eskom's needs in terms of the longer term. And as I've said, those contracts are being evaluated. As Deva have mentioned, the Kusile contract, we've gone out already also last year for a 60-year life of Kusile. Over and above that, Kusile's needs for the next 3 to 4 years have been fully contracted as the station is being put into commercial operations. So Kusile does not have any short-term coal shortages. There's actually more than sufficient contracts that has been established for Kusile to feed the units that will come in commercial operation. I think that's basically the current long-term plans.
Thank you. I think, Joy, you're asking us about Abraham Masango. He was found not guilty, so he will be returning back. And the misconducts, whether they will be reported, will it be reported? Will South Africans be informed on these developments? It's quite a challenge. If an individual is dismissed, it's a contract between the employer and the employee. Unfortunately, we can't do more than that. However, if we feel that the case should go to court, then the public or the South Africans will know the dynamics of such issues, because in some of these investigations, our aim is not to end only on dismissal, but we also want the legal process to take its full course.
I think the last one from Joy was about the cost overruns. Is it? Yes, yeah. Cost overruns for Midupi Kusile.
Cost overruns on that. What? Could you repeat what cost overruns?
My question was, with the huge cost overruns at Medupi Kusile and Ngula as well, will any of the senior executives who presided over those particular capital projects essentially?
The SIU is investigating all those things, and we will piggyback on that. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Let's take another round of questions. If you don't mind, I'm going to discriminate against you on the right-hand side. I'm going to go to the left-hand side. I'll start with Sikonati on your Sikonati. And then, sorry, man, if I can't remember you, it's because of all the age is beginning to set in. So I'll take you. So clearly you are in the luck now. So I'll move swiftly along and then come to my right. Let me quickly check, nothing on the left-hand side yet. Okay, sure. And then I'll come to the right. Mr. Ted Blom, maybe, sorry, Terence and the others, I've noted you. Mr. Ted Blom, I'm going to discriminate against you. This is essentially a media briefing. So for stakeholders like yourself, I'm sure we have actually done it before, where we have made special arrangements for you to come and meet with management. We will certainly do so if you so wish. I'll take Terence, and then I'll take Susan. So I'll take Susan, and then I'll also take yourself, and then I'll also do, yes, those four. So we can start with Sikonati.
Thank you. It's Sikonati Manchanja. I work for Financial Mail Business Day. Mr. Khatebe, how much is this coal replenishment going to cost Eskom? Why did we fall below the required levels? What is going to happen? What has happened to the people that allowed that situation to be what it is? Over the past years, on another matter, over the past years, there have been enough investigations, forensic and otherwise, that have made recommendations that people that perpetrated corruption in this organization should be charged. Has Eskom laid any criminal charges against anybody since you arrived and before you arrived? What is the status of those charges? Two, I also believe you have been on a roadshow recently looking for money. Have you found money? How much is it? And what does that do with to the capital adequacy or requirements of Eskom? There's also, Kulu, sorry, when I've climbed the Iroko tree, I'll take all the wood I need, sir. Please bear with me. There's also enough tension, or at least we are aware that Eskom needs to do some cost restructuring in terms of employees. Can you tell me how overstaffed Eskom is and what is it doing about it, about that? Last set of questions.
No. Sigonati,
this is for the board member. Okay. You didn't say who it is.
Oh, Ms.
Makubane, can you please tell us, does the board still have a tender committee? Two, how far is Eskom in appointing a chief executive and a chief financial officer? Lastly, how many executives are still out on suspension? And what is happening to their cases? You only spoke about Abraham Masango and Susan Daniels. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much. We'll move to the second one.
Thank you, Alex Winning from Reuters News Agency. The first question is, you recently announced that you're inviting bids for your mortgage lender part of the group. What other assets aside from that mortgage lender are you considering divesting as part of your sale of non-core assets? The second question is about your...
Could you please repeat your question?
Yes, so you recently announced that you're inviting bids for Eskom Finance Company, which essentially is a mortgage lender. And yeah, so I was just interested, apart from that, what other non-core assets are you interested in divesting this year? The second question is, you've recently returned from a non-deal roadshow. Do you plan any deal roadshows this year? Do you plan to sell bonds on the public market, either to domestic or international investors, and in what volume? And yeah, and the rest was covered by
Thank you so
colleagues.
much.
Thank you.
And Sigonati, part of your question has been answered already, I'm sure. The roadshow was a non-deal one, but you'll get another bite. Angela is now okay, so he's okay. Yeah, then you can give it to the lady next to you.
This is just a little bit of extra clarity on one of the supervisors' questions. Sorry, really from the Nega. Just in terms of all this extra coal procurement, emergency coal procurement that you do, how much extra is it costing you? But then can you please just give us an idea of what you're doing to ameliorate the effects in terms of financing? Are you raising more density of this coal? Are you selling extra stuff off? Are you cutting costs somewhere? Please could you just give us some detail? Sorry, and then just one quick thing on the nurse tariff application. You indicated that you were going to potentially possibly take the decision, the last decision on the court review. Can you give us some clarity on where that process is and what you're looking at?
Thank you so much, Lindley. The last one would be Susan.
Hi, Susan from I wondered if you could just tell us about what your investigation into coal shortages at Kendrina last year had discovered. You'll recall that overnight Eskom went from thinking that it had around 20 days of coal to discovering it only had 8 days of coal. So I just want to know what resulted in the coal book being inaccurate. As I see it, there are three possibilities. Either the quarterly survey was inaccurate, or the coal deliveries were inaccurate, and it's possible that someone perhaps was stealing coal from the stockpile. That seems like a lot of coal to take. Or the third possibility, that the expected coal burn rate was inaccurate, and that perhaps due to low quality coal, you were burning more coal than you were recording in the coal book. I think if you could just go through that for me, that would be really helpful. And perhaps also just indicate if there's any indication that Eskom employees have somehow played a role in intentionally obscuring those figures.
Thank you, Susan. Terence?
Terence Freeman, just on what your coal procurement budget for 2018-19 was, and what it will be with the addition of the short-term purchases to replenish your stockpile for the year, and at what average cost per tonne do you expect to secure this additional coal? And then if you could give us a time frame for all 6 remaining plants to be back at the required target for stockpile tonnes.
Thank you, Chris. I've noted you. The next round, I'll start with you. Mr. Hadebe?
Start at Sekonat, and I request, I will transfer to my colleagues. Coal replenishment, how much will it cost? I think CFO.
Yeah. I think in terms of the coal, we are still busy going through the RFP. We haven't placed contracts as yet. On some of the contracts we have placed. So the chief executive is also pushing us to say, tell us how much more it's going to cost, what will we do for the budget. But I think we are trying our best to negotiate within the parameters that we have. So it's difficult for me to quantify at this stage and give you exactly how much is going to be over. But one thing I can say at this stage is that we are going to battle to meet the budget that we have because of the extra coal that we're procuring. The exact number and figure I have not worked out. But if we manage to procure coal at around 400, 450 Rand a tonne, then I think we will come close to our budget or just being slightly over. I think that's a key challenge we have. The exact number I can probably give you outside the meeting. And that would go for the budget as well for this year. I don't know the exact budget for coal, but outside this meeting I can give it to you.
Yeah, with regard to why we are where we are, on coal, I started by explaining the reasons why we're where we are. And I gave a long explanation on some of the issues. I think we are investigating those issues. And there have been a couple of people, some of them who were heading some of the power stations that have been suspended. And we're going to follow through on those issues. And again, I want to emphasize that once we have completed that, it doesn't end up on dismissal. We'll also look as whether we can lodge any criminal charges on those. Have we laid any criminal charges? We haven't. We haven't done so, not because we don't want to do it, but it's because of the journey that we have to travel. But the most important thing now is you have about 5 investigations that are ongoing at the same time. On the one side, we have the president that has announced, we have Deputy Justice Zondo, National Treasury, we have a special SIU, and we had done ours, and we have been talking with the Hawks, and they came and we gave them documents, and NPA is doing their own work. We had a discussion with the head of NPA that we need to consolidate all the things. And we haven't reached an agreement on that, how it to be done, because it's just scattered, and we're doing exactly the same thing. So our intention, once agreed, is to launch those criminal charges. But when the Hawks and the SIU and everyone is doing exactly the same thing, maybe we have to take a step back until all those is concluded. But it is our intention. The roadshow, I think, Kulu has explained, it was just to touch base and hear where the investors are saying. I elaborated that it was very positive, not just on Eskom, about the country too. Cost restructuring in terms of staff, how overstaffed we are and what we are doing. We are not yet in a position to articulate those things, but we are not just looking at the staff costs. We are looking at the coal price. We are looking at maintenance. We are looking at CAPEX. The story will become clearer once all these things have been consolidated and concluded. I'm therefore not yet in a position to give you an answer on that. I think, is this Nelly? Okay, you have, does the board still have a tender committee? Yeah, okay. Do you want to, okay.
Thank you very much. At this point in time, we actually had a meeting with the Minister of Public Enterprises on the 17th of April, Minister Gordon, where he directed us that we need to review the board committees and their appropriateness. So at this point in time, everything is under review as far as board committees are concerned. And then on the second question around the executives, we actually have done our work at executive level. It is our expectation that the current executives that are here and also the acting executives will continue to do the cleanup operation. Oh, okay, we already have made a recommendation to the minister. My understanding is that the minister is going to go to cabinet on the 9th. So therefore, we should be able to know after that. Together with the CFO.
A question on EFC. What other 9 core assets do you have? Sorry? Okay, could you give
At this point in time, Eskom's only non-core asset that it's disposing of is our home loan book, Eskom Finance Company.
Yeah, with regard to foreign bond, it's an option we have. And in our budget, we did put about 12 billion in issuing in the foreign market. And we went there just to give them the developments. And probably somewhere in July, August or so, we'll assess the situation and probably we will raise a foreign bond. On coal, cutting costs from somewhere. And the NESA issue.
See, while you are deciding on that, I just want to make a request to our executives or managers on the floor. When you do make speeches or respond to questions, please face the nation so that they know who you are.
There's a NASA one. Yeah. Oh, regarding, okay, so my apologies. I'm trying to understand the question. The question on tariff increase, we are reviewing all the options. Right? We haven't made the final decision. We'll still have to communicate this with the minister and with the board. So there hasn't been any finality on the issue. Hendrina? Yeah.
So let me just talk about Hendrina, but before I go that, there was a question about the coal budget. Just to go back, like I said, I don't know the exact number, but what I do know is that you'll see now when we present our annual financial statements, there was a saving on primary energy for the last financial year. Somehow I do not think that you'll see it this year. That's the message I want to give, because we obviously have to procure more coal. And obviously, there's a lot of factors that go about when you procure coal this financial year. I think it's the price of the exported coal, the rand-dollar exchange rate influences it as well. So are we cutting and saving money to give to the primary energy? Yes, that's what the CFO has to help us. We're obviously going to try to see where we can save from a primary energy point of view. Obviously, the less diesel we use, that would go to some of the savings as well. But on the Hendrina issue, yes, there were irregularities around the Hendrina stockpile days. There was an investigation. An investigation was recommended certain outcomes in terms of disciplinary action against senior people. We have taken action against senior people in the primary energy environment as well as the power station environment. I would think that to give further details may not be appropriate, as it may jeopardize the continuing investigation and the necessary disciplinary process against those individuals.
That problem is not going to happen again. And if it is a question of the issue of using an expected coal burn rate and that not matching up to the coal quality being delivered, that could happen again. And we don't obviously want to have a situation where Eskom discovers overnight the stockpiles a third of what it was. All I'm asking is if you can give us some detail that would help to clarify whether this was a once-off freak accident or if this is a problem that Eskom is likely to experience again.
Okay, so my understanding is that immediately after this incident, we did a verification check. It's got nothing to do with burn rate, as I understand. And we did a check at all other power stations. We did surveys, aerial surveys, as well as physical checks on the stockpile to make sure that the error that was picked up and the abnormalities in Hendrina wasn't repeated at any of the other stations. We've actually now narrowed the gap between where we do these surveys to make sure that we do it more regularly to make sure that we pick up these issues. But I'm fairly certain that that issue at Hendrina will not be repeated. I'm not sure if my colleague Willie maybe wants us to add on.
Yes, I can add yes. There was an issues in terms of the calorific values that were used which affected the burn rate, but that has all been rectified. New processes and procedures have been put into place. And as Deva said, we also got our independent audit and forensics department to actually go and do the aerial surveys so that we at all times we are sure that we've got the correct stock days.
We'll take what is probably the last round now. But before we get to the people here, let me just confirm one more time if we do have people on the chorus line. Nothing. So we'll start with you, Chris. And I see Siseko, Antoinette, and then Sikonati. But before you, Sikonati, the lady here, and then it's ladies first. So yeah, we will start from Chris.
Thank you. A question on the coal price. Eskom has been quite open in the past about high prices of coal it was paying at certain power stations. So I'd like to ask, as I understand it, Hendrina has not been receiving coal from Optimum since November last year. What price is Eskom paying per ton of coal trucked to Hendrina? As I say, Eskom have been very open about this before. So I'm not sure, there shouldn't be any reason why you should not agree to give this. And the reason I'm asking is because the business practitioners are suggesting that they can deliver coal to Hendrina at 400 Rand a ton. So my question is, what price are you currently paying to truck in coal to Hendrina? A second question, if I may, and that is the question of environmental sustainability. It's my view that environmental sustainability is always the sacrificial lamb to operational and financial sustainability. Can you advise us how many Eskom power stations currently, coal-fired power stations, are in breach technically of the environmental regulations of South Africa and can only continue operating as a result of exemptions that have been granted from meeting the laws of South Africa. So I'm asking, to what extent is Eskom environmentally sustainable, and to what extent is it a breach of the law, other than that it has got exemptions from the Department of Environment to this effect? Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Sisako?
Hi, my name is Sisako from Business Report. My question, the first question relates to the steps that Eskom is taking in response to the coal shortages at the various power stations. I'd like to know. I'd like to know if the steps that you're taking, that includes diverting coal from other power stations and also perhaps running the OCGTs, will those pass? Are you confident that those will pass the regulator's potency and efficiency test when in future you submit an RCA application? Secondly, the Hendrina contract, the Roundup contract, comes to an end in December. When are you going to start with the procurement process of the contract?
Antoinette?
Mr. Hadebe, I just want to make 100% sure that I understand you correctly. When Mr. Molefe was heading up Eskom, he said that Eskom is doing away with the cost-plus mines. It was a change in policy. Have you, in other words, rescinded that decision? Is the policy again to proceed with the cost-plus mines? And then NERSA specifically recommended that Eskom should close some of its power stations. What response has Eskom embarked on in that regard so far? And then I believe there was an issue with international debt. Has that been resolved? With debt from an international buyer, I think it was Zimbabwe. Yeah.
Thank you, Antoinette. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Odwa from Bloomberg. I have a question for Mr. Govender. Could you please just repeat the details with regards to the 3 streams that you mentioned in terms of coal procurement? And I just also want to find out, have you already secured that buffer amount, and how much of coal would that be?
Thank you, Odwa. Sikwanati, sorry, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Hadebe, have you received the 11 million rand from Brian Molefe? If not, when are you getting it? Where is Monges in Tsokolo? He used to sit there. Lastly, you did not answer my question about how much money does Eskom have in the kitty, and how does that relate to what it should have as working capital? Thank you.
You know, okay, so can I just repeat your question? I think your first one shocked me. You're saying I have 11 million from Brian?
The High Court and indeed the Supreme Court of Appeal has said Brian Molefe must pay back 11 million rand to Eskom. Has he paid it? When is he paying it? I'll repeat the others for your benefit, sir.
You can repeat.
Where is Monges in Tsokolo?
Okay.
How much money does Eskom have in the bank? How does that relate to what it should have in terms of working capital?
Okay.
That will be all for this round. I'll give over to the CE and the team to respond.
Thank you so much. On Hendrina on call from Chris.
I don't have the detail of what price per ton delivered on trucks, but I'm not sure. I also do not recall we actually gave that type of information previously. Andre, am I correct? We've never developed that previously.
Very proudly would give those figures for very high cost one.
Yes, unfortunately, I'm not Mr. Molefe, so I'm saying we are involved in negotiations with coal, so I'm very reluctant to discuss commercial issues and how much we do it, because obviously there's a competitive edge involved in that. So we have not disclosed that previously, not to my knowledge. It may have been disclosed previously, but from my side, I'm very reluctant to give that type of detail. On the Hendrina issue, but suffice to say is that we are, like you said, the business practitioners. We're seeking a mandate to negotiate with them in terms of coal delivery. Hendrina, Optimum has not supplied coal to Hendrina. The last bit of coal that was delivered was somewhere in March, beginning of March, 1,000 tons or something. And since beginning of March, we have received nothing. I think we received for 1 day, so we have not received anything since then. So we've been trucking in coal the whole time in terms of that. In terms of the environmental sustainability, so just a couple of clarifications. We do not get exemptions anymore. Exemptions were granted by the Department of Environmental Affairs previously. It is now called, we are basically asked for postponements. And presently, all our power stations, in terms of any of the environmental legislations, whether it is particulate emissions, NOxes, SOxes, we are meeting all those based on the postponements that we have been given. So as we speak, we are not breaking any law.
How many have got postponement?
I think, I can't remember all offhand, but I remember there was about 4. I know that now recently for the last month, we've actually now applied for postponement for Tutuka. That probably makes 5. I can't remember the exact number, but I know that we have also applied for postponements for example, SOxes at Medupi and Kusile because of the quality of the coal. Once we've put in FGDs, then that issue is also it. But I think the important part of your question is, are we breaking any of the laws of the country? As we said, no.
That's not my question.
Yeah.
How many would you be breaking the laws if you had not received postponement?
Quite a few.
Yeah, that's the point.
Yes. But that's the reason why we ask for postponements, because to meet the legislative requirements in this country, for all the power stations, for everything, particulate, NOxes, SOxes, is in the region of 400 billion rand. Neither Eskom nor this country can afford that amount of money. That's why we went to the Department of Environmental Affairs and said, we cannot afford it, so they've given us what we term a 57% compliance plan, where they're allowing us for certain stations to give postponements, certain stations we have to put in what we term like fabric filter plants, put in FGDs, and we are working on that plan. But funding is still a challenge for some of those plants. In terms of the question about Hendrina, yeah. So in terms of the question about Hendrina, I've answered the question about Hendrina in terms of coal. The contract, as my understanding, doesn't come at the end of December. It comes actually the June 2019. That's my understanding of where the contract comes in. The issue about closing of power stations, issues like that. NERSA, was a question from NERSA about shutting down power stations. So I think we start off from a primary point of view is to say, besides the legislative issues that Mr. Yellen mentioned, there's also one called, we separate it because what Mr. Yellen asked was about atmospheric issues. There's another one called CO2. And that's the one that, as a country, we have committed to reduce the CO2 in the country. The only way you reduce CO2 is to cut the source. The only way you cut the source is you basically close down power stations to meet that requirement. Now, that's something that, as a country, we have to deal with. We have made certain commitments at COP21 to say we will reduce CO2 by certain levels. And obviously, the biggest role play in the country is Eskom. So we have to look and take that into account. So we have not made any firm decision as yet about shutting down power stations. We are busy with a governance process. We have a new board. We are busy soliciting that with the new board. And until we reach a time where we have followed a full process and we've consulted stakeholders, including the government, and then we'll communicate in terms of shutting down power stations. What we have done is we have taken some of the units that we regard as uneconomical to repair and put them in preservation, until such time that we may decide whether we bring them back or don't bring them back.
Antoinette, with regard to cost plus mines, we have set a budget, so we'll be working with them. We wouldn't have put a budget if we're not going to work with them, and we've had a discussion with them. with regard to closing of some of the power stations. The discussions are at the board level. We are looking at pros and cons as to whether that should be finalized. So once the board is finalized, we'll make the announcement with that regard. I think you're asking us about the Zimbabwe debt. It's been paid by Zimbabwe, not the full amount, but we have an agreement which Zimbabwe has always met. So we are expecting more payment over time. Then there's Andra, who asked you how much will that be?
The three issues around the coal streams. I think my colleague did a better job than me, so maybe let him just repeat the three issues that we're busy with from a long-term perspective in terms of the coal.
Sorry.
Yeah, basically, as we've said, in terms of the long term, what we are busy with is looking at the capitalization of our cost-plus mines to make sure that they will produce for the period that they are supposed to produce and making the volumes that they are supposed to make. So apart from the cost-plus mines, we have gone out on a tender for 100 million tons of coal over the next 5-6 years period. We are not expecting much coal of that to flow within the next financial year or this financial year. It was more a long-term requirement to supply us in terms of our shortfall coal. What we are seeing at this stage is that we are basically about 84% contracted for the period up to 2025. We are seeing about the 14-15% shortfall, 16% shortfall per annum. And that is the whole intention of this 100 million ton RFP that we went out with and that we are busy now in the process of evaluation and negotiations have basically started with some of those suppliers. The third stream, as we've said, was we have gone out on an RFP for the full 60-year life of Kusile Power Station. That process has also been closed and negotiations are basically in the process of starting. Just in terms of the securing of coal, we are basically every year having a shortfall coal because I think, as we all know, burn is changing. We are looking, so we are not aiming to have 100% fully contracted coal contracts. We might end up in the same position as we are at Medupi, where we are basically in a position of failure to take. So we are looking at our coal and what is the real certainty in terms of long-term coal requirements at each one of the individual power stations so that we don't get into a situation of overcommitment. I can just mention in FY 2018, we have established about 23 contracts. Those contracts are fluctuating between a 6 months contract up to basically 12 years contracts. So it's not as if the coal is not flowing. We are in that process and it's a continuous process. If I can just say, I mean, at the end of October, we were actually in a fairly healthy position in terms of our coal stock days. At that point in time, we only had 2 power stations that were below the minimum, and both those 2 power stations had more than 30 days of coal. I think what has happened, and that has really pushed us in this position of where we are sitting with this additional shortfall, was basically the Tegeta situation where we, on a very short notice, had to replace, and the Tegeta mines are supplying in the region of about 8.5 million tons of coal per annum, which we now have to replace in the very short term. And I think that is the one thing that has pushed us into this direction of a short-term shortfall in terms of the coal.
Thank you. Then, Skonati, 11 million from Brian. I'm not aware that we've received that. And Mongizi is on leave. How much money has come? I think the CFO can answer.
Caleb, if you can just stand up for us. Caleb Kasem is our acting CFO.
Yes, our cash balance that we have currently is about 14 billion. Obviously, our target is more like 20 billion at any point in time. What has been positive is that we see that the domestic markets have now opened up and are providing financing to Eskom. We've done quite a bit of transactions both in the month of March as well as April. So that gives us confidence that we'll be able to deal with our funding requirements and executing a funding program, which is a tight and difficult one, together with the positive sentiment we received on the non-deal roadshow. Thanks. No, I'm not aware of any 11 million at this point in time. No, I'm not aware that we've received anything.
We haven't received 11 million. He was talking about your second question. Yeah.
14 billion rand of cash, at the moment. 20 billion, that's our normal target.
Thank you. I think we have, which one was it, Siseko?
I asked Kulu if Eskom is going to be able to cover the costs that are associated with this whole project.
Oh, okay, sure. Thank you.
I'm curious about the June 2019 dates for the expiry of the contract, because I think all along, the communication from Eskom has been that the contract ends in December 2018. I think most of us here are hearing the June 2019 date for the first time.
Thank you, Siseko. In fact, if you allow me, because I see, maybe just to add on the list that we already have, Siseko obviously is clarity-seeking question.
The tail end of that Eskom media briefing, trying to reassure the South African public that there will be no load shedding this winter, and also talking about the financial state of Eskom. We're hearing from the CFO there that they're 14 billion rand in cash. Their target is normally around 20 rand. I'll have more on this and other stories for you on the other side of the break. Do stay with us.